just for most everything we're going to
Hope
see.
they don't hear my stupid questions.
No, there are no stupid questions. I learn just as much from these things as everybody else does when I do them.
Let's join. You're about to remote. So I don't know. I guess click join.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, now I
Guess
see you.
Are you on there?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Let me get out of this stuff, Brian. Hang on.
Okay.
Let me have control of that
Sure.
thing for just a second. I'll get rid of that and get. I don't. Let's see if I just might. Do I need? If I close this out, will the session stay up?
I would probably just
should I just
minimize it
minus it
because we're
down?
going to need to get back into the internet anyway. So
Okay.
that should be
So there's
good.
your light burn right here.
Okay. So
That's
and
what you need, I guess.
it is, and you've got your laser's not powered on yet.
No, nothing. I haven't done anything. I've got all the stuff hooked up. Everything is ready to go. I guess the emergency stop button should be pulled up, right?
It should be, and I think
Yeah,
you
I
actually
believe.
twist it to release it if it happens to be released. But you
Okay,
can go
yeah,
ahead and
it's up.
as long as everything's off the bed and everything's clear, you
Yep,
can.
there's nothing in there.
Okay, you can go ahead and power up the laser, the main power. You can leave the laser power off. Now that button just
Okay.
turns off the laser power switch turns off the main power to the laser power supply. So the rest of the machine will work. It just won't ever fire if that's off. If that makes sense.
I see. Okay. And I got my USB cord hooked to where it says PC up to my laptop PC here.
Okay, perfect.
So anyway, so just leave the chiller thing off for now.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and turn it on and make sure it doesn't air out, and that'll give it time to run a minute and get rid of any air bubbles
Okay.
that may be in there and that kind of thing. You might want to just look at the connections where the tubing goes. The first 30 seconds or so it's on, just to make sure you don't see a leak or something. You shouldn't. Those are pretty
No,
solid
I've had it
connections.
running before.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I already had that part running before.
Okay,
And
yeah.
the only thing, and this morning I noticed, I went ahead and lifted up the back where the laser tube is because it said make sure laser tube is full of water. It looked like there was just kind of a little bit of bubbles, but right when I turned it on, it kind of just, I guess it filled it up. It's so clear you can't really see the water, but it sounds like everything's running.
Yeah, yeah. And
You
if
know,
there
it's
was
all
a
hooked up
temperature or a water flow issue, it would alarm. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the green light normal on it, and then I've got I don't know, I'm not sure what the stuff on the front is, the RST and set, but the little the red letters say like 15.6C.
Yeah, that's the temperature.
front.
That yeah, and it's at 16.
Fans are on.
Okay. But
Yep. So just go ahead and hit the main switch then.
yep,
for
go
now.
ahead and hit the main switch and let's power that thing on.
Okay.
And okay, cool. It looks like you already uploaded the library, the materials library, so that's good.
Yeah. So I see light inside of here. The screen on the top of the machine is on.
Okay.
All that stuff. It's just sitting here, and the green light on my little doohickey is on. So
Okay.
There we go.
So I'm gonna reset to default layout if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Because we're missing some of the things that we need to see here, I think. And there we go. Now we've got our laser thing here. Now it shows disconnected. So we're going to go into devices, and it looks like you've already got one set up. And it is set to Ruida, and we're going to change that to packet USB, and I'll tell you about that a little later. And you've got a Nova 35, right?
No, the 24.
You've got the 24. Okay, so
Yep. And I was going to ask you about this. I know a lot of stuff's millimeter. Can we do this in inches?
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm going to set it up in millimeters for me to start, but I'll show you how easy it is to toggle because I still think in millimeters. So,
Okay.
and let me look at something real quick. I think,
Then we need to find out what the working area of the.
yeah, and I think it's 600 by 400. And 400, I'm going to look that up real quick here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got the.
yep, 600 by
other stuff. It was
400.
Like 25 point. Well, I'm going in inches. I think they said it was 26.5
Yeah.
by 15.7 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's 23.6. So I like doing the millimeters. Then we'll switch over to inches as soon as I get that set up. So We'll do that.
Okay.
Rear left is correct. That always needs to remain the same. And we'll finish. And I'm going to
Okay,
write.
so rear left, that should be where the cutting head goes back to home position, basically.
Correct. That's where the end stops
Kind of like
are.
my water jet.
Yeah. That's where the end stop sensors are. So when that head homes, it sends a signal to the controller saying I'm at 0, 0, so that it can plane your coordinates right. And
so rear left, which right now I'm assuming that's correct. I'm standing in front of the machine. The laser head is over to the far left at the rear of the back of the machine.
correct. And if you'll,
That's where it is right now.
Yep. And I'm going to right click on this devices tab here. And when I do, it should show that it's connected, but it's not. So we can fix that. Let me get your. Let's look at the device manager for. Oh, this is Windows 8. Let's see. Device manager is right there. It's been a bit since I've used this UI. So here's the device manager. And we'll look at your ports, and I want to make sure that's an FTDI driver. It is. And I can't see all the way at the bottom. Let me see something here. Let me maximize that again.
I wonder if I plug back in the USB, if it recognizes anything, or is it missing some drivers or something?
The driver's in there. So yeah, let's unplug it and plug it back in and see if we get the little.
Just the USB.
Just the USB.
Go back in.
Right.
All right. Let me give it a shot. Because I didn't plug it in with anything on, so maybe it didn't recognize anything. And I plugged it back in.
And no device found. No device found. So let's do something. Let's find my laser.
Oh yeah, I remember. I did watch some videos on this too a little bit, so I remember the guy doing that.
It did not find it.
Nothing, huh?
So let me just go back through this. Packet USB. That's correct. And finish.
I wonder if I should maybe try a different port on my.
That may be a good idea.
USB
Is
port.
pop it into a different port and it'll be on a different bus. Yeah, let's give that a shot.
Let me see if I can do that.
And we may you may need to. I don't know if you've rebooted your PC since you did the update, but that may be part of it also. We may need to reboot the PC.
No, I didn't.
So.
And I was just going to look down here, Brian. Down. Let me grab this
Okay.
for a second. I was just wondering about down in here. These icons. Usually, when it finds something, it'll usually come up down here.
It looks like there's a USB
and
icon
say
there.
USB thing has been detected or whatever.
Right.
But I'm not seeing any of that. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to go ahead and restart the computer?
Let me just restart Lightburn first. I want to look at this COM port again, and it says that it's working right, and you do have the correct driver installed.
Okay.
Yep, the FTDI driver. So I'm going to uninstall that, leave the driver, and then let's do a restart, and then it should find it again. But I'll let you push the button on that. It may disconnect our session. Sometimes it'll come back. Sometimes we may have to enter a new number again, but I would go ahead and reboot
So just
that.
go ahead and hit, do you want to restart computer now?
Yeah, that's what I would do. And
Okay,
we'll
let me go
reboot
ahead
it.
and click it.
I don't think the registry has been written with the new bindings for the USB port, so I think that's probably what's happening.
Okay. Well, at least the little machine's quiet.
It is, and I like the fan that comes with it too because it's quieter than those huge green ones.
Yeah. Well, that's doing it. What's the stuff on the other side now? I didn't really read too much. On the left side, you get the two green buttons, air assist control, and it says test, test, and then high volume and low volume.
Mm-hmm. So,
What do those do?
yeah, so the way that works is this has dual air assist, and typically when you're engraving, you don't want that strong jet of air like you do when you're cutting, because when you're cutting, you want as much air as you can get because it blows all that stuff out of the debris field and also accelerates the cutting process, kind of like blowing on the end of a cigarette. You know how to glow just from getting that extra induction of air. So that helps with the cutting process. On engraving, you don't necessarily want that because you'll burn away too much detail. So typically when you engrave, you want just enough air coming out of the nozzle to be a little whiff of air, just enough to maintain positive pressure inside that nozzle so that the smoke doesn't get on the lens.
Okay.
So, and those knobs are your adjustment. The green buttons are the test. So literally you could hold your finger under the nozzle and hit one of the green test buttons, whether it's high or low, and you can feel as you adjust those needle valves to get your engraving stage
so you
lower.
Just push down on the green button, air should be blowing through, and you just reach your finger down there, and then while you're holding that down, just adjust the knob to the pressure you can feel.
Yeah, when you push that button, it'll stay on for 10 seconds automatically, so you don't have to hold it. You may have to hit it again if it doesn't last long enough, but yeah.
I see. Okay. And it looks like, I'm assuming that blue plastic tube that comes down to the laser head must be your air.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then that comes through there and blows down through the nozzle along with the beam down there. Is that right?
Correct. Right. So it helps cool the lens and keep the smoke away from the lens. And then, of course, when you're cutting, that bigger burst of air helps with the cutting process. So, oh, it looks like it's going to let me back in automatically. Cool.
Well, it still has your name here.
Yeah. It looks like it may ask you to confirm again that I can get in. It may ask. Nope, there it is. We're back. So.
Okay, let me get rid of this other crap I got to here first, Brian. All this junk that always comes up on here.
Sure.
Make sure there's nothing else that. You always get all this garbage that comes up. So anyway, okay, I don't know. And what are we going to go? You want to turn on light burn?
Yeah, let me knock this little window out of the way so that we can see. And yeah, let's pop light burn back on. I probably should have looked at the device manager again to make sure that I'm sure it was seen when it booted up. So and it may be a little sluggish on this reboot. It may be still thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've got a little video on how to set those dual air assist, and I'll show you in Lightburn how to choose between those. The reason I chose packet USB, if you'll notice I changed it from serial to packet on the USB, is we've noticed some sequencing issues. Meaning it was supposed to be the engraved stage, but the cut stage will come on, so you'd have high air instead of low. To me, it doesn't matter that much. I leave both of mine wide open. But but there is a sequencing issue, and it has to do with the USB communications. And if it still exhibits that, we have some more fixes for that, so that you get the right stage of air. And I'll show you how to select that.
Well, when you normally do this, so in like the software, when you're making a design and they say it's on a cut. Is there a thing does the cut then know to only use the high volume air assist then?
Correct.
And then the low volume is used for your etching?
Correct. So if you had etching and a cut in one job, it'll switch to low air for the engraving, and then when you switch over to cut, it automatically switches to your high volume air.
Oh, okay. Hang on a minute, this computer's still kind of doing crap. I got this weather bug thing that comes on. It takes a minute here. Okay, I think that's off. Okay, so it looks like Lightburn's up, thinking about coming up.
Yeah, I may have to
this
think
thing's
for a
real
minute.
slow to reboot and reload all sorts of stuff until it gets back into the system.
Yeah, there's a bunch of little gerbils spinning around on wheels back there doing things we don't know about. So.
Yeah. Well, is your city still in one piece over there? Have you been rioted and burned out yet?
We've been rather lucky. We had a few windows broken and that kind of thing, but for the most part, it's been peaceful. So,
yeah.
And
yeah,
I'm kind of an introvert anyway. I'm in my element when I'm sitting in front of three computer screens in my garage with no one around. So I've been perfectly
yeah.
happy throughout this whole, pandemic and everything. It's my I'm in my element.
Well, that's me too. It's like people say, "Well, what has changed for?" I go, "Nothing." I go, "I've been
Yeah.
self-isolating for 23 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in the middle of my 40 acres.
Right.
I have my shop right here, and I'm the only one that's in this 40 by 100 all day long. So it's like nothing's changed."
Right. And I think the worst downfall that's happened for me, and luckily no one around me's been ill, and I'm thankful for that, is that Amazon Prime is not Prime right now because of a lot of this stuff going on, and I got so
Yeah,
used to that. All right, so
yeah.
you'll notice that it says found your Thunder Laser RDC 6440 down at the very bottom. Let me get that tab out of the way. You see at the very bottom it said it found it.
Where is that founder?
Right
Oh,
below your
found
color
Thunder
palette.
laser. Okay, so
Yep.
something did come up then.
So we're
So
talking.
we might be good. Good.
Now, I will say you probably ought to put the 60 watt material library in there, not the 80. They may be a little bit off. So,
Okay, can you do that?
yeah, absolutely. So,
Okay.
let's,
Can you get rid of the 80 one then?
yeah, we can. Actually, whichever one you load is the one it'll maintain. So, we'll just pop up, here we go. We'll get an internet browser and I'll run and get the materials for you. Quick, and we'll go to Thunder Laser. And where's my search tab? I may have to open. There we go. And this little smart search is actually kind of neat. You can just start typing and it'll start populating. So we are looking for the 60 watt materials libraries.
Oh, okay.
And we'll download that CLB file. And you can play with both of them. I mean, there's nothing, at all wrong
okay.
with that. So we'll just go back to the library and we're going to load the 60 watt one.
Okay.
And that should be in your downloads folder. And there it is. I got a little bit of latency across here. So, no, I don't want to rename it. I just want to select.
Yeah, it's in there. Go to open. Yep.
There we go. Okay. Now,
Okay.
so your controller is being seen, and we've got the library in there. So let's just take a minute and talk about engraving and cutting. So
Okay.
let's just do some text here in the middle, and we'll just go hello. And we could change fonts and all that if you want to, but let's see. And I'm going to reset your view again. It looks like it dropped the device list again. So we're going to go to Window, Reset to Default Layout. Now we've got our devices back. Okay, so right now that's set to fill. That layer, the color palette went away. That's weird.
Yeah.
It may be a screen resolution thing. There it goes.
There it is.
Okay. And it's set to fill right now, and your friend is going to be this preview window here.
Okay.
And when you look at it, you can tell that that's going to be a scan. And if you zoom in, you can even see the lines. So that's exactly what it's going to output. Okay. So let's say we want to put an ellipse around that and cut it out. So we'll just, I hit Shift, I made a circle. Control Z is also your friend. So we're going to do something like this. And I'm going to select them all with Control A. And I'm going to center horizontal and vertical, just like that. Now, if we look at it now, it's going to do something unexpected. It's going to engrave everything except the letters. And that's because we have
be cut out then.
Yeah, we have both layers, or both of these objects in the same layer. So let's just go here and we're going to make that outside layer blue, and we're going to make it a line. So after we do that, you'll notice that now you have an engrave, and then afterwards you're going to have a line. And it's going to engrave it in that order because that's the order that it is in your cuts and layers bar over here. If you wanted to cut it out first for some weird reason, you can highlight that and move it up in the order of priority. Now it's going to cut the line first, and then it's going to do the fill. Of course, that's not normally what you want to do. You don't want that piece floating around in there while you're engraving. So you typically want to cut it out later. So we're actually set up to do a cut and engrave right now as far as the design goes. So now we need to look at some settings. So I'm going to go into the fill settings first. And what you said you had some material, some acrylic.
Yeah, that's what I've got is 1/4 inch thick acrylic.
Okay. So let's go in the library and look at acrylic and see if we have anything. Now we're in millimeters now, so let's do something. You see
Yeah.
right here, all you got to do is click, and now you're in inches. So
Okay.
let's go back to acrylic and see if we see something close. And 1/4 inch, that's a little high. That's close. We
Quarter
may
is
point
0.250.
0.25, yeah. So that one may be a little much. That one's not quite it, but let's just go ahead and pick it. Actually, there's no cut on that one. There's the no thickness. Okay, so here's
Well, how do
engraved.
you make your own for that if
You-
you want it for 0.250?
You can make your own. And I'll show you about that in
Okay.
just a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my fill, and then I've gone into acrylic and I've opened the no thickness, and I'm going to choose engrave. And
Now the fill is the engraving portion, not the cutting part.
correct. Technically, fill
Okay,
is
so
fill
line
and
is
line
cut.
is line. You can do either. So that line could be an engraving if you don't use a lot of power, or it could be a cut if you use a lot of power and lower speed.
Oh,
See what I'm
okay.
saying?
I see. Yeah.
But so that's why instead of them calling it cut and engrave, they call it line and fill because it's more of the function of it rather than the depth because that's
Okay.
determined by speed and power. So
And normally line would mean cut, fill would mean engrave.
correct, yeah,
Basically.
right.
I got it. Okay.
All right. So I've chosen engrave here, and we've got the fill tab here, and I'm going to assign that to the layer. Now watch your speed and power settings up there on that first layer when I click this assign button.
Okay.
You notice
Yeah,
it
I
changed.
see it.
So I'm going to double click that and let's look at this for a
450
minute.
and 16.
Yeah, now that's a little bit thin. So what we probably want to do is slow the power down a little bit or slow the speed down. Oh wait, that's for fill. This is fine for fill. Let's leave it alone. That looks about right. The cut is the one that we're probably going to have to mess with. So now I'm on the line and we want to set up our cut. And I think I'm going to go with the 0.2. That's close to 0.2. And we'll just raise the power up a little bit to compensate. You see what I mean? Because that's awfully close to a 1/4 inch. So we're going to go to cut. And I'm going to assign that to the layer.
Did you just click cut or did you click 0.19? Because I didn't see how that worked out.
I
There's
clicked.
two of them there.
Yeah, I clicked cut because that's the one that I want to change, up here, the
Right.
line. And then I chose cut underneath the closest dimension that I can get and then assign that to the layer. So it takes these settings, and you can't see these settings unless you go here to edit cut, and it'll show you what those settings are. So it transferred these settings into this layer here, up here by your...
Okay, I'm kind of confused though. Like, let me see this thing for a second.
Okay.
So right down here you got that, but how did you get the cut that it knows that it's going to cut to 1.969? I didn't see how you did that part.
Well, it's those are already baseline figures that are in the library. So we're just using the
Right, but what about the one up above? How do you know that wouldn't cut that one?
it's
Or
a
you clicked on this.
right to open up. Right.
Oh, and then it opens up and it'll say, so can I unclick it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll have to drill
Okay,
down into
so
those.
Now if I click that, oh, it automatically shows cut?
Because engrave doesn't have a
okay.
thickness. So the way that's set up is you'll have a no thickness that'll work on all acrylic, and then your cuts you can assign them depending on speed and power to different thicknesses. And since we don't have the exact thickness, I'm going to choose the one that's closest without going over, and then I'm going to manipulate the speed and power a little bit to compensate for that extra thickness.
Okay, so that's always cut then when you click that open. How did the fill, like if you did another thing, or how does the fill one, if you pop this little thing open down here for the thickness of the material, how do you get it to say fill, or does that not say fill? Or
Well,
I'm kinda
no,
confused.
you engrave is going to be the settings for all acrylic because you're just barely etching the acrylic. So this setting is good for all fill on all acrylic. Does that make sense?
Okay, so all right, so I see engrave, and then then those two different sizes, thicknesses below it there.
Yeah, when you're engraving, thickness doesn't matter because you're not cutting.
Okay.
So
So how did you do the fill one up at the top though. I mean, I'm just curious. You click engrave first,
Okay, yeah, you click the setting that you want here. You click the layer that you
right?
want to apply it to, and then click
Okay.
assign to layer.
Assign to layer. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Assign to layer. I see.
Yeah, and you didn't see it change
Okay.
because we already did it. We already imported those
Yeah.
in
Right. Right.
earlier.
Right. Okay.
So,
So then you went down to which one of these thicknesses you wanted and clicked it open. And then you're
right,
going to do the cut one.
correct. And then I
Okay.
chose, the second layer, the blue layer, and then applied that cut setting under that 0.1969 to that line, to that blue layer. Now, this is not quite quarter inch, so we're going to go into
Right.
this layer, and you're already at 60%. So let's like bring it up to 70, and I think I'm going to slow it down just a little bit. And it may burn a little hot. These are baselines. You'll have to tinker a little, but I'm thinking that'll be pretty close.
Okay.
Okay. Now, here is how the air assist button works here. If air assist is on, it should be the cut stage. So this is correct because this is going to be a cut. So we want air assist on. Okay.
Okay.
In fill, in the engraving part, you do not want the high air assist. You want the low stage, the engrave stage, and all you do is turn that off. So off does not mean you don't get air at all.
Oh, okay.
Off means you're going to
okay.
get low stage, engraving
Okay,
stage.
okay.
On means you're going to get
Okay.
cut stage. That's how you choose between
Okay.
those two.
Okay.
Okay. That line interval looks good. And I think it's set up. I believe it's set up to do it. Now, if you want to use your autofocus, you can't use acrylic
Okay.
because these are optical sensors. There's an infrared beam that goes across there. It's like a driveway, like your garage door safety. If you walk through it, it stops the door. Same principle. But it can't see. I mean, it can see through acrylic, so it won't focus properly. So you could either manually focus, or you could find another material that's the same thickness as your acrylic, which you said it was quarter inch. You could
Right.
find a piece of quarter inch wood, or stack up some quarters, or find a coaster that you have laying around. Anything you've got that's not transparent that you could use to focus with using the
Okay, but what
autofocus.
if we just want to manually set it up? I mean, I'm kind of used to using like my water jet where I manually use my Z up and down.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Except for this is opposite. On this thing, on your laser, the bed comes up
Right.
and down. On the water jet, the actual cutting head goes up
Right.
and down
Gotcha.
to the bed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the same principle.
Same principle. Same
And
principle.
we have I have a little tool. It's just a flat little metal spoon handle thing that's 60 thousandths thick.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just use the slow Z, which brings it down really slow, and then it pushes that thing down just to where you are going to touch that. Then you pull it out from underneath it, and it leaves 60 thousandths between your work
Yeah.
material and the cutting.
Use it as a feeler gauge, basically. And that
Yeah,
that square
basically,
piece of acrylic that came with your machine in the box, that's 6
I got it
millimeters.
in my hand.
Okay, that's your gap gauge. So, but I wouldn't use the Z axis. I would get it close, and if you'll notice, there's a big brass knob on your head, and
Right.
that nozzle, that head is telescopic. It's you can extend it, so you can get real close. Get within a millimeter or so, and then turn that big brass knob, set your gap gauge on there, and let the nozzle touch, and then tighten your screw back, and you're good.
I see. That's right on the right-hand side. If I'm looking here from it, there's kind of about 3/4 inch diameter
Yeah.
brass
That knurled knob, yeah.
knob there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you can get your material really close, within 3 or 4 or 5 millimeters even, because that tube will come out a good ways.
Uh-huh.
And then you can use your gap gauge and just unscrew that knob and let the nozzle touch the acrylic,
Right.
tighten it back up, pull
How
the
do you know
acrylic out.
what distance from your work material do you want this stuff?
Six-
Do you want the cutting head thing?
Basically 6 millimeters is the gap between the nozzle and the work.
Millimeters?
And that's
Okay.
the distance that the autofocus works at. If you'll notice on that lens tube, there's a round stop ring on it with an Allen screw in it, and it's secured to the nozzle. You may have to drop it before you see it.
From here.
Yeah, you'll have to loosen up your brass knob and let your head drop a little bit, and you'll be able to tell.
Oh, okay. Can you pull this door open then, or right now?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Okay. So, anyway, I haven't brought anything up. I mean, do you want to bring up the bed first, or does this thing have to do any setup inside of here first?
No, it's ready. So let's explore that nozzle for just a minute. I want to show you the stop ring and everything. So
Okay.
let's
so
just.
Go tell me what to do. I'm in here looking at it.
Okay. Let's loosen up that knob and just pull the head down a little bit, and you'll see that stop ring that I was talking about.
Okay.
And all it does is make
pull it straight down.
Yeah, just pull straight down. If you loosen it enough, it'll almost fall by itself, and you'll see that little stop ring. What that is the adjustment for the autofocus. If you're going to use autofocus, you need to make sure that the head is all the way up to that stop. That's the calibration for your autofocus. But since we're not using autofocus, you can bring up your bed, put your material in there, get it somewhat close, within a half inch or something, and then drop your head down using that depth gauge to get the 6 millimeters.
Okay. I mean, how far up and down do you want to pull this thing? I mean, I've got it to where basically I let it drop down, kind of holding itself now by the air tube.
Right.
So it's dropped like a quarter of an inch. So you just kind of want to you want to probably bring your bed and material up, fairly close.
Yeah, so that you're in that range of motion.
Touching, and then just adjust that thing. You don't want to pull that thing down a half an inch or better, right?
No, you don't want to strain it. But yeah, you're right. Get within a good distance. You just don't want to crash your head. It scares me when people use the Z-axis to focus all the way, because if you hit that button one time too many, you've just knocked your head out of whack. And we don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. So the stop ring is set. I see the little bolt, that goes through the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So is that where this pushes up against it? Does that mean that the head's all the way up, like you were talking about, or?
Yeah, if you push the head all the way up till that stop ring hits the carriage assembly, that is where it normally needs to be set if you're going to use autofocus.
I see.
But you can manually focus all you want to all day long. A lot of people don't even use the autofocus. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of one of these guys. I'm not sure if I so much trust the autofocus on something, because I don't know. I'm thinking I don't have a problem with manually focusing something, even though I'm not sure exactly how to focus it or what the distance is exactly. But
so
because this is a little different,
than
a water jet as far as focus.
Yeah, the deal about that is you can manually focus all you want. I don't trust autofocus, and a lot of autofocus doesn't work well on lasers. Even on those $40,000 epilogues, you hear about people, they just yank their autofocus sensor out. They've got a stylus on the head, and they don't even use it because it fails. Our autofocus is surprisingly accurate and repeatable. And the only reason that I use it is because I've got the Lightburn camera, and it's calibrated to that same focal point as the head. So if I autofocus every time, I don't ever have to recalibrate my camera. If you manually focus and you've got your camera set up already to your autofocus depth, that's going to change your scale a little bit. It might only be a millimeter, but it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
So, but that's another. Okay. We'll reserve that for another, because I don't even think you've got the camera on there yet, do you, or anything?
I don't have anything on here.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and focus your material, and we'll give this thing a shot. I want to show you about the.
So anyway, just go ahead and lay the piece on there then.
Yeah, lay the piece on there. I'd get the head somewhere where you can drop your depth gauge close and get it, within a couple millimeters, and then drop the head down to meet and pull your depth gauge out, and you're good.
Well, I've got the piece in there, but it's not focused, or it's not quite on the piece. I cut these pieces to the exact working size on my water jet for what it told me in inch form.
Okay.
Okay, so now how do I do this as far as the Z-ing up and Z-ing, bringing the bed up and down?
Okay, hit your ZU button on the control panel.
Yeah,
I
see a ZU button, and then the up, down, and side to side arrows.
Yeah, so you're going to use the ZU button, and I believe
click it and hold it while you're doing the arrows up and down, or just click it and let it go?
No, press the ZU button once.
Okay, and then the up, down, and side to side arrows.
No, press the ZU button once, and then you're good.
hit the ZU button once.
And your left and right
Okay.
arrows raise and lower the bed.
Okay, left and right arrows?
Correct.
Raise and lower?
Correct.
Oh.
Because up and down toggles your
Okay,
menu.
left arrow. Yep, left arrow is bringing it up. Let me just check. So the up, down arrows then must bring the head back and forth?
No. When you're in that mode, in ZU mode, you've got a bunch of menus on the display. Up and down moves your highlighted menu where you're at on your screen.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see it. It highlights different stuff.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I'm up now. I want to keep it up in. It's highlighted blue, Z move, and then just use the left-right arrows.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I got it. Sorry, Brian. I'm a pain in the ass. I'm real critical about every little thing I do on stuff like this.
No, man.
So I may ask a lot of dumb questions.
These aren't dumb questions. This is what I like to hear. You're paying attention. Complacency is bad. So.
Okay, so here, well, let's see. That's kind of odd. Maybe this bed should go over a little bit more or something. I don't know if that's going to swing through there. Okay, now this should still go up because it's not even near that head. It must come up below. Yeah, it does come up through there. Oh, okay. I just noticed that the bed thing that's laying there, just as it was coming up through this cutout space, the white cutout area, that the bed was a little bit closer over to one side. I wasn't sure if it was. So you got to watch that bed, don't you?
Well, you might want to make sure it's
centered so it comes up through there.
Yeah, there's 2 indexing pins on that bed that should keep it in place. Yeah.
Well, this thing kind of moved around.
Okay, well then, yeah, we need to drop that bed back down. You need to open your front door, and let's check.
Let me do that then.
Yeah, let's check and make sure your bed is seated correctly.
Okay. Yeah, let me bring, because I did notice earlier when I had reached down there to kind of lift that and see what it was. It's kind of just moving around in there.
Okay. Yeah, there's 2 indexing
bring it
pins.
all the way down, Brian?
To where you can open up the.
Past where the door is?
Yeah, where you can access it without it being in the way of the frame. And if
rid of this material.
Okay.
Okay, and now I need to get one of my keys, though, which is in the back of here. Okay, I got it. And so the bottom front door is what you want me to open?
Yeah, and you should be able to access it as long as you got it low enough. And if you'll look on the
I'm down there.
Yeah, and if you'll lift up on the honeycomb, you'll see two pins, and they should engage the holes. You also need to look and make sure that none of those blades underneath in the blade system are not. Make sure they're all seated in their slots correctly. I have seen those jump out, and you just want to make sure you don't see any daylight. Make sure everything looks level and everything's seated properly.
Yep. Okay, let me double check. I think they're all good. I see what you're saying. And there's just the 2 alignment pins on the front side here. There's nothing back on the other end either.
Correct.
It doesn't look like.
Yeah, it just rests on the blades for all other purposes.
There it is. Yep, I see exactly what it is. So yep, the pins are in the holes now. So let me shut this door. Yep. Okay. All right. Now we put that piece of material back on here. Yep. Okay. Now, as far as this thing being, the working size of this, I cut my piece of material to what it says is the working size, but how do I know where my upper far area would be that would be to start on that? Because now the laser head looks to be, I'm assuming, I guess it's what I would call in the home position, upper far left rear corner. So the light, I can see the little red light, but my material isn't touching that light. Do I bring this material just to the edge of that light? Is that the starting point for where the cutting area would be?
For all intents and purposes now, yes. You'd want the dot to be right in the corner of your material.
Right on the very corner, upper left edge of it, right? Okay, that's what I was kind of wondering. Because the big tray that you've got is actually larger than the piece of material that I have. But it told me in the book that the working area of the laser was a certain width and diameter, or width and height, and
yes.
that's what I cut these pieces out to be.
Yes, yeah, and that's
so
right.
You actually get a little more bed than you do working area.
Correct. There is a margin around there to make room for the mechanics if you need to go all the way to the edge and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, so best thing, just go ahead and usually place my material top corner edge on the beam of light.
Right. And that's going to assume that we're using absolute coordinates, and I'll show you about those here in just a minute. So.
Okay. Okay. Plus, you can always kind of sprinkling, like on the water jet, we don't usually start on the very edge of a piece, especially if you're going to cut something out. You would move. I usually come in a quarter from, say, the top and a quarter in from the bottom of the material.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's where I start my cut.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So. Okay, so we're at the ZU, so let's do this, and we'll bring it up. They don't have do they, see on my machine too, the water jet, they have a fast axis, or a fast Z up and a fast slow down. In other words, if I want to just bring it down quickly, I can just go ahead and do that and bring it down fairly fast, almost like a quarter inch away from the material. Mm-hmm. But when I'm doing my final setup, you wouldn't want to do that because you couldn't stop that thing fast enough. So there's also what's called slow Z, up and down, to where it just barely moves when you're pushing the thing. So it gives you more than enough time to let off, before you would crash your head into the material.
Right. So on this one, you can.
This has that.
Well, you can adjust your speed, but there's only one speed, and the reason for that is you don't usually have to worry about crashing the head because A, you're using autofocus, or B, you're manually focusing. At which point you're bringing the head down to the bed instead of vice versa.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Plus, I can get this within a quarter of an inch without crashing the head on it. So.
And it should move. It should move 1 millimeter per button press, or you can hold down for continuous.
Oh. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to say I'm probably within 3/16 of my material.
Okay.
Just by eyeballing down at it.
Okay. And
so that's where I just put the Z at. So now I'm not, on this gauge. Do you hold this gauge on edge? I'm assuming that's what you do on edge, obviously, because it's about a quarter inch thick, so it's on edge. It has a scale on it.
It's not quite 6 millimeters. It's like 5, because 6 millimeter acrylic is actually like 5.6. But it'll be close. There's a 2-inch square that also came, a piece of square acrylic that came with your machine.
Let me see.
But you can use that triangle gauge, and you can lay it flat.
I have a little card here, too. It says reverse compensation settings, too.
Yeah, I'll show you where that stuff goes. That's the...
I thought that was supposed to be something later.
Yeah, that's something that we can check out. That's a little more advanced. So.
Okay, so anyway, well, all I have really... I have a ruler down here, whatever the ruler was for. I guess for measuring shit, I guess. But all I have really for that is I have the little, it just says F equals 6 millimeters.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking you stand this on edge is what I'm saying. And the 6 millimeters is down at the very bottom of the tip.
It is, but you can lay it on its side, and it'll be just about 6 millimeters in thickness. So you can lay it sideways.
Right on the side?
Yeah, you can lay it flat, and then just let your head touch it.
So then 6 millimeters, I'm guessing, is close to quarter of an inch, because this stuff looks like quarter inch thick stuff.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Matter of fact.
That's actually the focal point.
Yeah. Yeah, 6
well,
millimeters.
I'm actually a little low on my head then.
Probably.
I need to come down just a hair, right?
Either that or bring it up. If you don't have it on the stop ring, if you still have some adjustment, you could always bring the head up.
Oh, no, hang on. No, the stop ring's all the way up, so let me bring this down.
But yeah, you could lower the bed a bit and then just drop the head down to it. However it works out.
Okay, and why? What the hell? Okay, not sure what I'm doing now here. Nothing is... My buttons won't function right now, Brian.
You got to hit the ZU button again. You probably got out of it. You need to make sure that the Z move is highlighted.
Let's see, the one to the left was up. No, I'm not getting it to go for some reason. I did click ZU.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I did.
Is Z move highlighted blue?
Anything in here. Should I move
Are you trying to go up?
the material out of the way?
Well, are you trying to go up or down with the bed?
Well, I'm trying to go down with the bed.
Okay.
And I was going to do the right arrow click. The screen's on. It says highlighted Z move.
Okay.
But when I push the right button, nothing happens. I don't know if something got disturbed.
I think right is up, and it may be at its max limit. It may have hit a limit switch. So hit the left arrow and see if it goes down.
No, none of them. Neither one of them are doing anything. There's no control. There's no control at all of doing anything up to it.
Okay, so
I'm going to pull the piece of material out though for just a second because
you can probably just hit escape a couple times on your controller, and it'll get you back out to the main screen. Then hit ZU again.
That's weird. Okay. Anyway, hit escape now.
Yeah, hit escape a few times, once or twice.
Okay, I did. It's back onto kind of a blank screen.
Okay, so now hit your ZU button.
Okay, I got it now.
And see if you can get some movement. It might not move up because it may be sensing the bed, at its max height. So you can only move down.
I see those two sensors on the side there.
Yeah, that's your autofocus sensor. It's also your max
I got
Z.
it to go down. Okay. Yeah, the right one is going down.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, okay. Let me put the material back in here. Must have tripped something in there. I don't know.
Yeah, acrylic does weird stuff too. It'll bend the light and make the sensor kick on prematurely and all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, because the acrylic was underneath the beam.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me. Okay, now I'm getting it to come up. So I'll bring it up. Can probably almost do this, buddy. Okay, I'm pretty close. I think what I'll do now, you're suggesting bring it up as close as you can. Go ahead, use the brass knob and adjust it down onto the spacer.
Right. Correct.
Okay, that's what I'll do then. Okay, I'll unbutton this. And you want to keep the head and everything kind of straight in the same position that it always was, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't move too much unless you get it so far out that it doesn't have any surface area touching on the inside. But if you're just moving it down a little bit, it should be fine. Once you tighten it back up, it'll self-level or straighten up on its own.
Okay. Well, I would say then that we're pretty close to where we need to be right now.
Okay. Well, good. Let's call it good.
So that's where we're at.
So let's go back over to Lightburn, and I want to show you a few things about the coordinate system.
Okay.
So
I'm watching.
Okay, so you'll see this red box up in the very top left corner.
Yeah.
That's representative of your device origin, and that will never change. It should never change. That should always be there. And that was what we set up initially when we chose rear left as the home position, or the origin.
That's where the head is right now.
Correct. So you'll also notice in the center of our artwork, there's a green box.
In the artwork, yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So right now, if you'll look down here in your laser tab on the right, you'll see that we showing start from current position.
Okay.
And the center is chosen under job origin of that current position. Now I'm going to toggle these radio buttons, and I want you to watch that green square as I do it. You notice it's going to those appropriate areas on the artwork.
Yep.
Okay.
I see it. Yep.
When you're in current position, the way that works is wherever you move your head, let's say that we want the current position of your artwork to be this green. That's representative of your head when you're in current position. So you can move your head anywhere on the artwork, and when you hit start, or on your board or material, and when you hit start, wherever the head is, that's representative of this green box. So it's going to lay out your artwork below and to the right of where your head is. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, is that right? So where if you put your head, if I bring my head in a quarter from this material and down a quarter, or in other words, down and in, so it's a quarter inch in each way, and you hit, and it's in the upper left, is that exactly where it's going to start lasering?
Yes, precisely.
Right there?
Precisely. So you could move your head a quarter inch in on each side, and your artwork is going to be a quarter inch in on each side. Now, let's say you have.
When you start in the center one, though, what is that? How does that work? That it would go to the center to.
Yeah.
Which means if you can't be a quarter inch in on the end
No, but
on
what
each side if you started in the center, right? Because that'd be up and out of the whole thing, wouldn't it?
exactly? So what this is good for is if you have a, let's say you have a blank, a log, that little, they cut them up in discs, and or make a coaster. Let's say a coaster. Let's say you have a round coaster, and you want to put that artwork dead center. You can move your head to the dead center of your coaster, and
Ah,
that will put the artwork dead center of the coaster.
okay. I see what you're saying. Okay,
So
okay.
now, normally, a lot of people work in absolute coordinates, and that's probably what you may be familiar with your CNC. Now you'll notice that your job origin and your laser origin are the same. That means it's
Yeah.
calculating everything from 0, 0 here. So that means if you move your artwork over here, oops, let me group it so it'll stay together. Control Z, Control Z. I want to highlight both of those. I'm going to right click and group. That way it'll stay together when I move it. You can move this. If you move this over here, now it's going to be way over on the right. What you see is what you get if you're in absolute coordinates. Wherever it is on your screen is representative of where the artwork is going to go.
Okay.
So you could guesstimate and get a 1/4 inch in on both sides and do something like that, and you're still ready to go. Does that make sense?
I see. Okay. Well, can you see? I guess here's how the water jet works: is that you actually, the piece of material be laid in there, and then I actually move the head itself. In other words, that's the starting position. Is wherever I move that head, and if it's a 1/4 in and a 1/4 out, that would be the far bottom left extent of my drawing or cutting piece.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay. So your water jet uses current position then, because you move your head to where you want the artwork to go. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. And I usually start, like I said, a 1/4 inch in, a 1/4 inch up. So that'll be the very bottom left piece of wherever that work is. Even if it's even if it's a circle, say that would be the far edge of the circle. Even if the circle was or an oblong would be up, say 3 inches, but it's not going to go any further towards the end of the material or the bottom of the material than where it starts from.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I follow you. But
Yeah.
so and we can use absolute coordinates to do this test. But you can play around with the current position. And what's cool about that? Let's say you cut this and it doesn't work out right. All you got to do is move your head over a little bit, and then run the job again, and it's going to put it beside it. If you move your head over, if you've cut this one out and you've got a hole here now, on current position, you just move your head over a couple inches or 6 inches, however long that thing is, or half the length of it, so that it'll end up over here. You see what I mean? I might be making it more complicated than it is. I think for right now, let's just use absolute coordinates. So it calculates everything from 0, 0, and then we're going to go back to wherever. Literally, let me group it again. Wherever you put the material, that's what you're gonna get. So if you move it over here, that's where it's gonna go.
Okay, yeah, because basically what I've done is to set the piece of material. It's not exactly on the edge, but it's basically up in the far upper left piece of the working material, and I've got it, I guess, pretty much parallel.
Yeah.
To the deal. That's another thing that I'm not sure what a guy could do to make sure. See, I built a square, what I would call a square, that kind of fits into the corner edge of my water jet bed, so that because your y-axis and x-axis are perpendicular parallel. So
right.
your material has to be the same. You wouldn't want your material in there kind of cocked at an angle,
right,
or anything. You know what I'm saying?
So
I don't know if the material. All I can do is eyeball this stuff for now. I don't know if there's a way to make it so that it's
you can add
perfectly square.
Yeah, you can add a fence, on both of those edges, or come up with something. Even cut a piece of wood as a spacer and lay it along the edge, and lay it across the back edge. However you want to do that. Honestly, most people don't, unless they're doing the same job repetitively and they do it every day. Most people don't make jigs; they just eyeball it. But that depends on what you're doing. So
Well, one other thing you could do, couldn't you? Because this thing has a laser eye coming down, I can see that the laser, the red beam, is on the material.
yeah,
You could actually take and move the laser head to the far, or just move it across the material to the far end, and as long as it stayed on your material,
yeah,
you would know that you're pretty good,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You could go to each side and line up the dot. Yeah, on the corners.
Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely,
Well, there's an idea.
absolutely.
Okay.
So, there's more stuff that that I want to show you about the using the current position. But I think just for right now, the simplicity of absolute coordinates will work for us just to do the first job, and
Okay.
it actually looks like it's ready.
Okay.
I'm gonna double check my settings. This is a line, and I've got my air assist on because I want the high output. And we haven't
Okay.
adjusted your air yet, but that's okay. We'll
Right.
do
Right.
that. That won't that won't
Okay.
affect what we're doing here too much. And I've got it off here, so that should select the engraving stage when you engrave.
That's on your fill.
And you notice I've got them
Okay.
backwards again for some reason.
Yeah, I see that was.
So I'm gonna bring the fill back up to the top, so it'll do the fill first.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's ready to run. So you could literally hit the start button right now and run the job.
Okay, so now our fill is what, the hello part or the
Yeah, the fill is the
which
engraving.
is just the engraving part.
It means it's gonna fill in whatever is in that black right there. Yeah.
Engrave it,
Instead
and
of
then it's going to come back out to the blue line and cut the piece out.
and then cut it right. And in your preview, you can actually play this preview,
Oh,
and it'll show you the steps. And you can even look at transversal moves. It shows you everywhere the laser's moving, whether it's firing or not.
I see. Yeah.
So
Okay.
we'll speed that up a little, and then as it gets, let me drag the timeline maybe, or speed it up, or let me see if I can get it to come up.
Oh, okay.
And
I see. Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
cool. Okay.
there we go. And then it's going to cut around it.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Now this total time is not accurate right now. These are set for every other laser that can only go at 500 millimeters per second. Ours go at 1,000. So to get your time estimates here right, there's some settings inside Lightburn that you have to match to the machine. They don't. They set some rough defaults for the majority of lasers, but ours are a little more sophisticated and faster than most lasers. So some adjustment
okay.
there, and I don't know exactly what those adjustments are yet. But
Okay.
there's some documentation on that, and we can work on that. I don't ever use my
okay.
estimates anyway. It's hard to get
Okay.
those right. So, but I mean, you're ready to actually push the button and run the thing if you want. Now
Okay.
there's a
You know
couple
what I
of
want to do? Do we want to check that air stuff yet, or?
you can, yeah, if you want to.
No, the thing is, wouldn't I have to move that down,
You
get
would,
that stuff out of the way
you
to
would,
be able
and
to feel that air?
yeah, you would. I mean, you can listen for it too. The cut, you'll
Okay.
want the needle valve to be all the way to the left, wide open.
Okay. Okay.
And
Hey, Brian, can you hang on just a couple seconds for me?
yeah, man,
My wife had a note here.
take as much time as
hang
you
on
need.
just a minute. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Take all the time you need.
Okay, hang on just a couple minutes for me.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So did you want to try to adjust this air stuff a little bit, or what should we do on that?
I mean, we're already set up.
Okay. So
Let's.
will it still work?
Yeah, it won't affect it that terribly.
Okay.
Especially with acrylic, it's you don't need a whole lot of air, but
Okay.
we'll still get the idea. So
Okay. So next thing, what? Shut the door. I'm assuming.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shut the door down. And I'm still in the Z program thing up here. Do we got to get out of that or do different things?
Yeah, I'd hit escape a few times, or it may not send the file over. It needs to be out on the front
Escape.
screen. So
Okay, well, I hit escape once, and it's just kind of back to that
okay,
screen when it fires up.
perfect.
Okay.
So there's two.
Oh.
There's a couple different ways you can send this to the laser, and
Okay.
you can hit the start button, and what's going to happen is it's going to do just like a printer. It's going to stream that job packet by packet to the laser, and digest that information and run it, like a buffer, just like a printer would. Now, for something like this, it's okay. If you had a big canvas in there and you were fixing to do a 2 hour long, high definition image, and it was going to take 2 hours to run the job, I wouldn't hit start.
Okay.
There are conditions that are not favorable for USB communications. Although they're stable, they've got error checking and things like that going on. If you get any noise in the line, if a capacitor start device kicks on a branch circuit, if your refrigerator kicks in, something like that, it can cause enough of a voltage, enough noise on your USB line to actually interrupt the job, and it'll kill your job.
Oh, I see.
So,
So in other words, what you're telling me is we have a file on this computer, but it's really not over on the machine yet.
right. And if you
And
hit start,
so
it's going to send it a
sending
piece at a
itself-
time.
It's sending it a piece at a time to the machine. So I think what you're going to be getting at is, if when I'm ready to do actual jobs, is to load them onto like what, a USB stick and download them into the machine.
Well, that is a possibility, and you can do that. But no, you can hit the send button, and what it will do is send it over to the memory in the controller. So it'll send the entire job and make the job is now reside in the controller. So you won't have those transmission errors. Now, if you just hit this send button, here's what's going to happen. It's going to send it to the controller. Nothing else is going to happen. You're going to have to get up, go to the controller, find the file, select it, and then hit start. I like doing it that way because I've got my eyes on what's going on. But as you get more familiar with it, you can hold down the shift key and hit send. And it will send the entire job over to the controller. As soon as the controller has accepted the entire program, the entire job, it will automatically start the process, just like it does when you hit the start. So you've got three options. You can hit start and it'll start right away and stream it. You can hit send and it'll send it to the controller, in which you go over and manually find the file and start it at the controller. Or you can hold down your shift key and press send, and it behaves like start, meaning it'll start the machine automatically, but it puts it into the controller's memory first.
Okay.
So
Okay, I see.
in
So
this,
if I hold down on shift and click on send, it's going to send the whole file over, and when the file is completed
it'll
in the machine memory,
Yep.
then the thing's going to fire up and start the cutting.
Yep. And that's the one that I recommend. Now, there's a caveat to that. There's only 128 megs of memory in that controller. So if you send jobs over and you don't ever delete the ones you don't need anymore, or the ones you don't use all the time, and clear that out every once in a while, you'll get file transfer errors because there won't be enough memory. But you can do that from Lightburn. You can make those changes here in Lightburn. So just for the time being, why don't you hold down the shift key and hit the send button and see if your laser your alarm stalk turns red, and you see hear everything kick on. It should start doing the job.
Okay, so yeah, we got the chiller things on, lid's closed. So.
Make sure your laser power switch is on, otherwise the laser won't
Oh
fire.
yeah, I didn't do that. So turn laser switch on right now.
Right.
Okay. When you normally start this up, then do you just turn the main switch on first? It always said, and then can you just turn the laser switch on even if you're just, if you're just firing this thing up, and then when you're going building files, or do you only turn that switch on right before you're going to cut a job, or what?
Officially, it's good to just turn it on when you're doing the job, but I don't ever turn mine on and off. I leave it on all the time and just turn the main power on and off. But there
Oh,
again, that's where
okay.
complacency could get in. So it's a good idea to be
Okay.
familiar with your laser switch. If you're not going to use it for a while, I'd kick it off in case you accidentally send a job. If nothing else, you don't want to burn your material and not mean to. So
Right,
if
right.
something acts up and you hit send by accident, or hit start and you do something, it initiates a job. It'll go through the
Okay.
motions, but it won't actually burn. So you haven't wasted your material. I've seen that happen a lot. Um,
Oh, okay.
when you're
Okay.
working inside the machine, and moving your material around and that kind of stuff, the laser's usually
Yeah.
not going to fire, but just it's like an emergency brake. It wouldn't hurt to
Okay.
set it. Um,
Okay.
so
All right. So go ahead and just hold turn the laser switch on. Okay, it's on.
mhm.
And then you said once this thing starts to turn on, then my air system, the suction system, should be going too.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was wondering about that. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to hit. Let me control this thing. So just hold shift and then click send and just let go everything.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you'll have to
Okay.
just
Well,
hit
I got
OK.
a little screen that came up
Yeah,
says file name.
yeah, it will ask you to prompt. You can leave it the same, or you can call it hello. It doesn't matter. So you can identify it
It
in the
just says
controller.
light burn on it.
Yeah, that's fine. You
So just
can.
click OK now.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's already doing something. Red light came on,
Yep. It doesn't take long.
and
That's a
it's
small
already
file.
moving. Well, it must have sent that thing over awful quick.
It did. It's not slow.
Okay, this thing's cruising back and forth. Now the thing is this acrylic was tinted, kind of a dark tinted.
Okay.
Looks like what I'm getting on here is white.
Yep.
White hello.
Yep. That's the acrylic dust coming off as it's ablating the surface.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Now it looks kind of fuzzy around that. Is that just dust around the edges of it?
It is. And that'll wipe
Okay.
off. They say don't use denatured alcohol on acrylic. And I think they mean extruded acrylic. They say it causes crazing. And I've seen videos where they've put it in alcohol and it'll just crack and go crazy. I've been using denatured alcohol on my acrylic for 5 years, and I've never had one crack or any evidence of crazing. But you
Yeah.
could use LA Awesome. You could use, any kind of medium detergent or some sort of, you might even be able to wash it off with water. But I always use denatured alcohol. But yeah, you'll be able to wipe all that residue off. There's always going to be some residue, no matter what happens.
Well, it's cutting a circle now. It already did the hello.
Now you should be able to tell if it cuts all the way through. Don't move the material, just in case it doesn't cut
Right.
through, because we can turn
Yeah.
off the fill and run that line again and make a second pass on that cut if it didn't cut all the
Okay.
way through.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's back over to the edge. It looked like once it finished the cut, it looked like the whole piece moved just a hair. I'm thinking
Yeah,
it cut through it.
I
Anyway,
think
so now I don't know. It's done. It put itself back over to where it was.
okay.
I still hear the machine buzzing. Is this thing running still? Oh, it is running.
It'll
Okay, now the machine kind of like turned off, or something turned off.
yeah, it runs your
The air thing up here is still running for me.
it will
And now it just shut off.
yeah, it'll stay on about 10 seconds after the job's complete to evacuate all the smoke.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And you can still open the door
And
once you
I'm hoping that I put this air thing on the right way. I couldn't test it because it wouldn't turn on, and I didn't have any kind of a plug to connect to it. But I'm assuming this is a kind of a big white round one. It says Hun and Guan on it or something.
yeah, it's the inline filter.
HF 150.
Yeah, the inline fan. There should be some directional
Now,
arrows
the
on
only
it.
thing I can figure is there was an arrow, a black arrow with pointing
Yep,
one way, and that was, I'm assuming, was the exhaust way.
it is. That shows the direction of
Okay.
the airflow.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right, so can I open the lid now? It seems like everything's quiet now, and,
Yeah.
and the light's green on my machine.
Yeah, and even if your exhaust and stuff is still on, you can, as soon as the light turns green, you can open the door. What'll happen if you open the door when it's lasing is it'll stop the job.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
it'll make the laser quit firing. That's a safety that's built in.
Oh.
But as soon as the light turns green, you can open the door.
Okay, well, it's cut through. Now I got to figure out how the hell Oh, I can't get it out of. Oh, there it is. I got it. Now, is this just dust on it or what? I don't know. Oh, it is just dust.
Yeah, you should be able to wipe all that off.
Yeah, I just wiped it off. Okay. Yeah. Well, it did. It cut all the way through, and the edges and everything look pretty nice on it.
Okay, so let's add a
The
quarter
hello
inch.
stuff, I don't know. It's etched down in there. Of course, everything's just kind of dark because this was tinted.
Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that cut setting as your quarter inch acrylic since it cut all the way through. If it looks decent.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. It cut all the way through just fine, and I don't know how far down it etched, but it, what, maybe 7/8 thousandths of an inch, something of that nature. Maybe does that sound about right?
Yeah, typically I mean, if you're doing edge lit acrylic, like with the backlit LEDs, you don't even want any depth hardly at all, just enough to mark the surface. So that might even be a little deep, but it depends on what kind of look you're going for and what you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So
Well, so I mean, I saw you doing some of this stuff, but I'm still kind of I'm still kind of at a mystery with this thing.
sure.
I'm just thinking if I could try to somehow myself. I don't know how do I get rid of some of these windows over on this side over here. You just gotta X them off.
Well, a lot.
You're moving them.
Yeah, a lot of these you're going to need. So the basic layers that are already there are already what you need. Now you can dock them in different ways. You can move them different places. You can move your color palette to a different spot.
Okay.
And there's a lot more windows that aren't open. I'm gonna drive for a minute. I'll show you. If you go up to the window tab, you'll notice that there are all of these that aren't even turned on yet.
Right.
So you got variable text. If you were going to do serial numbers or something like that, it would automatically increment it on every job, that kind of thing. The console you probably don't need. There's an art library built in now. And you can actually upload your own graphics that you use all the time, and it's like a clip art library so that you can get to your stuff easily. There's that kind of stuff. Now, I want to show you shape properties for a minute because that's good with images, but you're going to like this. I'm going to take that, I'm going to ungroup these, and we're going to get rid of that oval, and I'm going to turn on shape properties. There we go, and now it shows up here. So I'm going to draw a square around that hello, or a rectangle, or something like that, something like this. And let me zoom in a little more so we can see it. Whoa, not that far. Come back. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to make that blue again. And your color palette keeps hiding. Now, I don't know if you're seeing that. I'm going to get rid of...
I'm not seeing it on my end.
Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of the shape properties again. I don't have much choice. I'm gonna show you about that. I think if we move your color palette, let's see if I can do it. I think it's right here. Yeah, we can move your color palette like right up here. I want to dock it though. I think I can make it dock. Like, get in there, snap the other way, snap the other way. Ah, come on. Well, that'll be close. So I'm gonna make that one.
That's fine that way too.
Yeah, you can dock it. It's not quite docked, but that'll be okay. So I'm gonna go get my shape properties and turn it back on. Every time you default that layout, it gets rid of all your extra things. So let me click outside, I think. And I'm going to Control A to select everything. I'm going to center it up again, both directions. Now, the square is ugly. So let's go over to shape properties. And all of a sudden, you've got corner radius. So you can adjust your corner radius to whatever you like. You can do like a 0.25 and give it a nice little... Yeah. You can round off the edges and do stuff like that. So that's another option. So that's one of the things you can do with shape properties. You can change
that's called a fillet on my water jet.
Yeah.
Basically the same thing.
So that's just another little neat thing.
Yeah.
Here's your file list, and you have to refresh it because it's not in real time. But if you'll notice, that's that job you just sent.
Okay.
So if you want to delete your files from there from your controller, all you do is click right here, and now you've cleaned out your file list. You don't have to do it at the controller because
Okay.
we were talking about when you actually send them, it fills them up in the internal memory of the system, and that's what this
Right.
file list tab is for, is to manage those files.
Okay. Okay. I see.
So,
Okay.
um, oop,
So what if I wanted to try to do something here while you're on here, because you're moving this thing around, but I'm not catching some of these. Where
sure, I
I
got you.
need you to kind of tell me maybe
There you go.
how to do this stuff if you let me move the thing around. I've got a picture of like a black and white silhouette
Okay.
on my desktop that I was thinking of getting
Yeah, drag it in there. You can just drag it
and
right in.
import it.
Well, you don't even have to.
Now, all I know is I usually went up to say, well, let's see, there's a couple different ways, wasn't there? This usually tells you what it was: open, save,
Yeah.
import. Can I go to import? Can't
Sure.
I?
Sure.
Okay, so I left click import, find my desktop, and I think I had like, well, there's one right there. Let's try that. How about this little guy right here?
Yeah, one of those would be awesome because I want to show you something really cool. This is going to blow your mind.
Okay, here's a little bear.
Okay. All right.
Okay, now, can I bring him up by, oh, I can, okay.
Yeah.
Just I'm just using my scroll.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember this stuff, Brian, so that's the first imported thing, but I'm trying to remember how weren't you supposed to get that image off there, and then you would have I want it to trace. I can't remember
Yeah.
what I had to do that.
Okay.
What do I do?
Yeah, that's what I was going to show you. Let me drive for just a minute. I'm not going to actually do anything. I'll let you still do it. But what I want to do is go to the preview and show you the difference. If you'll notice as you zoom in, oh, not that close, you'll notice that the edges they're not bad. This is a pretty good image. But you can see how there's
Right.
some variations here. They're minute.
Yep.
And that
Right,
tracing
right.
it can do that. So all you do is right click that image after it's selected, and it is selected because you can see the little dancing dots around it. So
Okay.
just right click the image.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that and how to get rid of that, but I've forgotten already.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm going to right click it,
Mm-hmm.
and let me remember, was it trace image next?
Correct.
Left click trace image. Okay,
Yeah.
there's our image.
Mm-hmm. Now
Then
there's
was it just okay?
well, if you do, your image and your trace are going to be there. So you'll have to delete your image and just leave the trace. If you want to prevent that, you can check that little box, delete image after trace, and that'll do that all in one
that's
step.
What we want, right?
Yeah, that's ultimately what you want, and you can toggle that on and off. If
Hey,
you
was that on or off? No, that's okay. Delete image after trace. Now that is on. I think that's how we did it before.
right.
And then if you clicked OK, now wasn't this other stuff? Didn't you say you could go up? Can you? Yeah, you can look at this now, right?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Told me this before.
Yep,
This stuff. Are you seeing this on your end?
I am.
Okay. There's the jaggedy lines.
Yep.
You were talking something about what was that down here?
Well,
Smoothness or
there
threshold or all that
is.
stuff?
Yeah, and Jason made a video about that on the tracing, what all those do, and it's a great
Yeah,
video.
I think I saw it.
But honestly, with the black and white silhouette like you've got here, clip art, you don't have to do much. It's gonna pretty much
it's
do
not
it out of the
bad.
box.
Okay. All right. So we'll leave it like it is. Oops. Uh-oh. What did I do there?
Oh, that's a selection thing. You don't have to worry about that. You may have to. Yeah, that's where you can just trace one
did
section.
something.
So
I think I just did something.
yeah, that's fine. Just cancel, and then we'll just go back and trace again. There's an option in there, I think, where you can choose a window of that and only trace a portion instead of tracing the whole thing. And you've got the window way out there in the middle of outer space where there's no artwork. See what I'm saying? So just cancel, and yeah, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Image. Okay, so there it is. So now we want to delete the image after file. So turn that on and then click OK, right?
Correct. Okay. Now
Now,
let's go back to our
say, go
cuts
ahead.
and layers. We don't need the file list right now. So let's go to the cuts and layers tab.
So I'm over where.
It's over
Okay,
in
so that's what I'm curious about how these windows work. Oh, do I click on cuts and layers
yeah,
down here?
click that tab and it'll open up your
Oh, I
layers
got it.
window.
Okay.
Now if you'll
Yeah, I
notice,
see it.
you're online right now. So if you look at your preview, that's going to be a line and not a fill. So
Okay, so right now the blue highlighted bear for everything is all blue and it's a line right now.
right. So click your preview and you can see. I use
Preview.
it's the computer monitor icon next to the gear at the
Oh,
top.
up here. Okay. Left click that.
Yeah. See,
Okay.
so that's a line. We don't want that. So you cancel out of that or hit OK.
Just hit okay. All right.
And you want to go over here. You can either choose. You can actually choose your other layer, your black 00, and that we already had it set up for fill. So you've
Go
got
up
your
here to the
artwork
left.
highlighted. So go to your color palette and choose the black layer.
Go up here and choose black.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now it's a fill. So go back to your preview and you can verify.
Okay.
And while we're in preview, we're going to zoom in and see how much cleaner the lines are now.
Okay. So now, so that's weird. So black is always the fill one, or
No, that's just whatever you set those colors to. That's what they're going to retain, and we use those as a
okay.
fill layer in the last job, so it retained those
That's
settings.
what I see. I see. I see. So over here where it says mode, you could actually change that black to cut then, couldn't
Yes,
you? Or
absolutely.
line, I mean.
Absolutely.
I see what you said. Okay. Okay. So right now our black is used as a fill. So I'm seeing the bear in black, and so what part of him would be? So the black part would just be what? All etched out, and then the white parts
Yeah.
would be the ones that are actually cut out.
No, there's no cuts at all. We don't have a cut line there. It's all just fill. That's just an engraving. Now, let me show you something about that.
Okay.
Can I drive a minute?
Yep. Go ahead.
No, I'm going to zoom in just a minute and notice how much cleaner all those are now since we vectorized them. See
Yeah.
how clean and even they are? So that's going to be a lot
Yeah.
better output. Now, let's say you wanted to cut that thing out. You could draw a box around it. You could do this. You could do that. Or you could select it and use your offset tool. Now that it's a vector, you can't do this with an image unless you get a vector out of it. But now that it's a vector, you can use your offset. Whoa, come back. And you'll notice now that you've drawn an outline around it. And now it's done an outline around all of it. And we can fix that. Let me move this. So let's say you want to cut that out. Let's make it a little bigger. You want to cut it out like this. Okay, so now we've made an outline, but now you notice there's junk here you don't want. This is going to be a cut. So we're going to change that because we already had that layer as a cut. But now you notice there's this part in here that you probably don't want to cut.
Right.
In that instance, you can select it, ungroup it, click out, and now you have control over each individual piece. You can clean up the stuff you don't want. So
Okay, how did you just get rid of that though?
I selected it and just hit delete.
Oh, okay. I didn't even see you do it that quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Here, let's put it back. So actually, let's go back a couple. I'm going to let you do the whole offset. I want you to work.
Yeah. Let me do some of it. Just tell me what to do.
Okay. All right. Now we're back where we were. So select your artwork or your image, your vector.
Just go right in the middle of it. Or anything?
You have to click. You have to click a part of it. So try to grab a line. Just try to click on one of the lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's selected now, right?
Yep. Now go to your offset
Okay.
tool,
Offset.
the big O.
Shoot, where was that?
It's in the left sidebar, about midway.
Oh, this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Left click that. Okay. Got it. This can move around. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So now what are we trying to do then? Because you just did an offset. So now there's a solid line around the bear and then the moving lines inside the bear.
Right. So you've still got the bear selected, so the inside, and that's why it's moving. That's still selected.
Okay.
You've added the offset, and that's so we can cut it out. So you're actually doing a contour cut is basically what we're doing here. So like
Okay.
Because otherwise, if you run the job without that, you're going to engrave on your acrylic, and if you're not going to cut it out, you're just going to have a bear on a big, huge piece of acrylic.
Mm.
So
So
okay,
that's what the offset part's for then?
well, I'll give you a real, I will give you a real world for instance. Let me drive for a second. Let's say that we want to
Yeah.
make a keychain out of that bear. So I'm going to grab my circle tool. Now I'm going to let you do it. So
Okay.
uh, select your circle tool
Okay.
and go over somewhere
All
near
right.
the bear's head and hold down
Okay.
the shift key and then drag and make a circle. It doesn't have to be big.
Oh.
We're going to make a keychain.
Okay. So
So
hold
you,
shift and drag.
well,
Oh.
yeah, not that big. You know, about the size of his
Oh.
eye, maybe a little, yeah, like that. And it
Oh.
and it
Oh.
doesn't matter where. That's fine. You can drop it right
Oh.
there, and then we'll move it.
Oh. Oh, okay. Just let off both of
Yeah,
them?
let off. Now,
Okay.
now drag
Alright.
it up away from his head a little bit, so there's some space between there, so there's some meat between them. You know what I'm saying?
Just left click it and pull it around?
Yeah, just drag it straight up, and then we're gonna align it. Now,
Oh.
yeah, you have to go. I'm sorry. Go hit escape.
Escape.
And
Okay.
now you see you're back on your arrow tool. So now it's already selected. So just move it straight up. Just
Okay, now I can left click and hold it and move it around.
yeah. Or you can use your cursor keys to move it. So just get it
Oh,
up
I
above
see,
his
okay.
head. Yeah, right about there. And it doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to show you another trick.
Okay.
Although it will
There it
snap
is.
to the center. It'd probably snap to the center. You can hit Control A to select every. Yeah. I think you can hit Control A. Actually, we need to turn
Yeah.
that. We need to turn that blue while you've got it selected. That circle.
Okay.
So let's turn that circle blue.
So,
That
what
just-
do I do next?
Just click the blue on the color palette. And
Oh, blue over here.
Yeah, mhm.
Okay, because it's selected. Okay.
it's selected. Okay. So now hit Control A. Or hold down Control A, and that's select all. That'll select every piece of artwork that's on the board. So hold down Control and hit A on the keyboard,
Control, hit A.
and that
Okay,
should
I did that. Didn't do anything.
click. Let's see. Okay, now try Control A.
Oh, okay. Control and then hit A.
Yep.
Oh, okay, now it did.
Yeah. Now let's do let's do a vertical center, and it's up at the top. It's not the crosshair one. It's the one next to it. I don't know if you can see it.
Well, you're talking over to the left panel or straight up
No,
above?
I'll move to it, and then I'll let you take it from there. But there's to align vertically. And I think I know what's going to happen, but we're going to try it. I think his eyes are going to merge, but let's see. It might all be together. So let's click that.
Okay, just left click that.
Yeah, left click that, and it'll give you a choice. And you want
Okay.
to align V center, and it'll center up
Right.
that circle. So click
Oh, I see.
click align V center. Okay, see, it centered it up.
Yeah.
So now it's all pretty. Now that you have
Okay.
all that selected, hit your offset tool.
Go over to the left and hit the offset tool.
Yeah, hit the O. Okay, and
Okay.
then drag your modal box out of the way so you can see what's going on.
Okay.
You see what we did? We just made a hole for the key for the key ring.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
let's leave that. Let's just hit OK. That's good. That's good the way it is.
Okay.
And we're gonna while you have that selected, let's make it blue also because it's gonna be a cut.
Okay. So the outside line is going to be our cut.
Correct. And
Okay,
you'll
but
need to
is
select
everything
the.
selected or just
No,
that,
yeah,
or
you're
how do we
right.
select-
You click outside the artwork somewhere so that you deselect everything.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Now just select that outside, the far outside, the
So
contour
I
cut.
just left click on it and it'll select it.
Mm-hmm.
Just hit the line basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now let's
Okay. I see. Yeah. So anything that's moving is selected. Got it.
correct.
Okay.
So hit the blue. So we're gonna make that a cut.
Oh, you got to hit the blue again each time after you select it. Then.
Well, yeah, because it's black right now. So
Okay.
now,
Oh, okay. I see.
all right.
all right.
Now all we have to do is right click and ungroup because you want to probably not cut that middle of that heart out. You see what I
Okay.
mean? We can get rid of that extra piece that's in there. So
Yeah, down here. So, but right now, just go anywhere inside there and right click.
yeah, right click
Right click.
and
Go
ungroup.
to ungroup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then click
Got it.
outside the boundaries where you can deselect.
Out here.
Now go in and click
Oh,
that inside blue part that you don't want. It's
okay. You just left click on it
just left
for
click.
selecting.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then hit delete.
Okay. Oh, and then delete. You mean delete on my keyboard?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Oh.
Now
Okay.
you
I
have a
didn't know you could
keychain.
use delete up there.
So let's
Is there
look.
another way to use delete too, or you just? I mean, if you right click
You
on that with your.
you could right click and hit delete. Yeah. Or I think Control D is delete. There's a let me.
Oh. Okay.
I'll show you something real quick. There is in the help section, the quick help and notes. There's all
Okay.
kinds of hotkeys and gestures here. Backspace or
Oh. Okay.
delete is delete. Control plus minus is zoom out. Control plus equals is zoom in.
Okay.
So
I see. Okay.
there's all kinds of shortcuts. Matter of fact,
Okay.
most Jason pretty much doesn't hardly use his mouse. He uses his keyboard shortcuts for just about everything. But I'm not that
Oh.
good.
Okay.
I've never gotten that good.
Yeah.
So let's look at the preview now and see what we've got.
Okay. So we're gonna go up here to the monitor.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay,
now you
there
have
it
a
is.
cute little engraved bear, and then it's going to cut out the outside and cut out that circle so you can put a key ring on it. Now you've made yourself a keychain.
Okay. So now what about the little heart and the eyes? Do those get cut out too?
No, there are no cuts there.
Okay. So what happens on the black part and then the white part, which are the eyes?
Nothing.
What gets
The
engraved?
black means that it's going to fire the laser. White means it doesn't.
Okay, so the black part of the bear is all just kind of slightly engraved into this piece.
Correct. And then you
And
cut
the
it
white
out with the
part of
outside
the
lines.
eyeballs would stick actually up above
Yes.
the
Yes.
black part, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then it's going to come out and it's going to cut the hole
Mm-hmm.
for the key ring hanger, and
Mhm.
it's going to go over and cut the outside edge
Correct.
around this thing, right?
Correct. Yep.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yep.
It's going to take a little getting used to some of this stuff. This is different, a little different for me.
It is. Yeah.
Do I just click OK to get out of this then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so there's our little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we had already cut out a little piece of circle out of this piece. So now I can't start this up in that left corner because it would be cutting right out over the piece that was already cut out. So how am I to say if I want to to cut right beside this circle? Do I move my laser head over past the original cut out area, and that would be the new starting point in the far upper left, or how would that work?
Not using absolute coordinates. Absolute coordinates is what you see is what you get. So using absolute coordinates, you would just come up here and guesstimate that other one was about 6 inches long, and you'd look at your grid lines up there and just move beside it like this.
Okay, but what if we wanted to do something else? Can you move the laser head over to where you want to start your cut?
Yes, sir. That's where you would use current position.
Okay, that's what we need to do then.
And you probably want to do this. So now wherever you put your laser head, that green box is representative of your laser head.
Okay, so now how do I move my laser head over to where I want to start my cut?
Okay. So using your arrow keys, you just move it without going into any menus. Your up and down and left and right will actually jog the head back and forth and move the gantry, to and fro. So you'll just
Oh wow, but that's awful fast.
yeah, we can slow those down. All of those speeds, idle speeds and acceleration speeds, all of this stuff is you can fine tune it. A lot of people don't. Most people just get used to it. They're set at a level that once you get used to it, it's pretty comfortable. So.
Oh, I can kind of touch it once real quick too, and it just slightly moves it for me.
Yeah.
I'll get used to this stuff, Brian. I just got to catch on here.
No, I got you.
Okay, but the thing is, I want to do is, boy, that up down's awful damn fast, though. Boy, son of a bitch. What I'm trying to do is get to the far edge of that oval to the center part of it, which is down in the middle, so I'm not gonna, so when I do my new cut, okay, I'm pretty good. I should come over maybe just a skosh. Geez, that thing's
So yeah, your laser head should be um, to the top and to the right a little bit of the hole that's there. Is that what you got?
Well, I'm over to the right-hand side of what we just cut out.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, because we cut out that oval piece that we just did. So what I'm at now is I want to be in the upper. I'm at the upper piece of my material, and about a quarter inch
Past.
out.
Yeah.
From the farthest cut line that we cut out.
Now, don't forget this. Once you get the head in the place that you want it, hit the origin button on your controller.
Origin button? Okay, so it should be where I want it, because it can't, because I know it won't cut any, but it's at the far upper piece too, so we want to make sure that's going to work, I guess. Okay, because we got to place, do we have to place our little bear in a certain spot? Or
No.
Does it?
It doesn't matter.
We don't.
Like,
so this will be the far upper left cut of wherever that bear is?
Yeah.
Or of the bear, I should say?
Yes. Where that green square is representative of where it's going to lay out the artwork in reference to the head.
Okay, so is that where my head is right now?
Not yet.
I didn't even see that. Was that moving back and forth when I moved the laser?
No, it has nothing to do with the laser head moving. Now, you can look at where your laser head is by turning this on. Show last position, but it is still showing it in the corner.
Oh, that's weird, but it's not in the corner.
Okay. That's okay. You haven't hit origin yet, maybe. Or did you?
Okay, so anyway, hit origin. Okay, I just clicked it.
Let me see something. Get position. There we go. I had to get position the first time. That should be about where your head is. See the crosshair?
Okay.
That is where your head is.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to move this artwork.
What did you do to get that over there? I didn't see it.
I just moved it. But this is for demonstration purposes. That is what you're going to end up with.
Right, but how did we just when we hit origin? What did that do for me?
It told the laser that that's where you want to start from.
Okay, from that point. But was that little red dot there?
No, that's the show last position.
Origin or what?
No, that little red dot I turned on. That's where you can actually move your head around and see where it is on the screen. It's right here, show last position. You can toggle that on and off.
Okay, so that's how I would find out where it is.
Yes. So
now, can you leave that on?
Yeah, sure.
And then if you move your laser head, can you see that little orange dot moving back and forth when you move the laser head around?
Yeah, move it.
Okay, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so I gotta keep an eye on this. Okay, I just moved over to the right, but that didn't move.
Okay, well, here's why.
Right where it was.
Here's why. In the move panel, you have to get position, but I'll show you. I'll show you why. If you move the head, are you away from the machine right now?
I'm right next to it here.
Okay, make sure that your hands and everything are out of there. I'm going to move the head remotely.
Okay, the window's open, the door's open. That doesn't matter.
No, that doesn't matter. I just don't want your hand in there or anything.
No, there's nothing there. I'm not inside the machine. No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to move the head, and if you move it from light burn, it moves in real time. You see that?
Yeah. Now I see the thing moving when you're moving it.
Well, the reason why is because Lightburn is telling that dot where to move as you're using the jog buttons. If you're jogging from the controller won't automatically tell Lightburn where it's at. You have to go up here and get position. So that's the difference.
Oh.
Now, here's something else
then
that's...
Can I move it from in Lightburn then?
Yeah, absolutely. But that might defeat the purpose of starting at user position, because typically people want to be over there and line it up by line of sight when they're moving their head to the right spot.
Oh, okay. So I think I see what you're saying. So then so I can go ahead and use the controller. Let me do that.
Yeah.
And because I understand what you're saying, because you're right down here inside you with your work where you can see what you're doing.
Right.
Okay, so there I am. I just want to move it up. Oh, well, you're going to have to make this thing slow down just a hair, though.
Okay.
Quit. Okay, I've got it up in a position where it's a pretty good starting position.
Okay.
So now what you're saying is I've got to go on the computer now and click show last position, and that should show me up where we're at now?
No. Hang on.
No?
Hit origin. Remember, you need to make sure you tell it this is where we're going to start.
Oh, okay. Every time I move that for a position that I'm going to start cutting, hit origin.
That's the way I do it. I've heard that you don't have to, but that's the way I do it because that way I know that's where the origin is.
I clicked on origin, Brian. So now what am I supposed to do?
Okay. Now, if you want to,
last position now.
If you click that, it's just going to turn it on and off.
Oh.
Okay. You have to go up here to get position. You have to query the controller and ask it where it is. So there you go.
Oh, so you just that's all you got to do is just left click, get position. Now it is showing me where my controller head is at, right?
Yep, that's right. So you can control shift and send that job, and it'll put it in the right spot, even though it's not on the right spot on the screen. Does that matter? Does that make sense? Because you're using your current position, not where it is on the screen, because we're not using absolute coordinates now.
Okay, but can you drag this piece up and line it up to that dot?
It won't do any good. I mean, for visualization purposes you can, but you don't have to.
Okay, so what do I got to do now? To make sure that that's going to be up cutting where that thing is? Because I see our artwork's down in the far right corner.
Right. All it pays attention to, as far as position goes now, is where that head is. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the artwork is on the board when you're using current position.
Okay, so it is in current position right now, right?
Yep. And you did hit origin, so the machine knows that's where you want to start from. So all you need to do is send the job to the laser, and it'll put it in the right spot for you.
Okay. So now under current position here, where I've got the thing, because what else is there? I see user origin absolute. So we're in current position, but you've got the little dots too in there. I can't remember if you clicked in the center of that, what would that do for that? Would that?
Let me show you just for demonstration purposes. If you sent the job with that just like this, it would give you an error, and you'd get the error because it's going to do this right here.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So half of the stuff would be above your work.
Right. So I'm gonna move it back to wherever that green dot is. You see what I'm saying? Once you set your origin, that green dot means origin.
Okay.
And it could be here. It depends on how you're setting your job up.
Okay.
Which way you're working from. If you're doing a coaster.
So I would normally want to be upper left on current position because of the way I'm setting the laser head.
Yes.
In that position, I'm at the upper far left corner of where I'm going to be my area for cutting right there.
Correct. And subconsciously, that's the way most of us think about this layout, is because origin is upper left. So you orient your job position in upper left so that you can think about it spatially in the right way. But yeah, you're exactly right. But just for demonstration purposes, again, we're going to move this way over here where it doesn't matter. I mean, just off. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And it's still going to go in the spot you want it to go.
Okay. But we want to leave our in current position and then the dot in the upper left because that's basically where I set that head. I see what you're saying. If I go down and click in the center, basically it's putting my laser head in the center of that piece of artwork, right? So when I tried to cut it, it would actually cut up and out of the boundary of your acrylic.
Yes, exactly. In current position mode, the green box on your artwork is representative of your origin point that's set by the head position.
Where it's going to start cutting.
Yes.
Or where the head was. Yeah, I understand what you're saying now.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we're still set. We don't have to raise or do anything. I guess I can just close the lid down. Okay, so now we're going to do this. We still have the thing that says laser up there, so we should do the control and then send.
Shift send.
Oh, shift and send. Shift send. Okay, let's write that down. Shift send. Start machine. I know I'm gonna be calling you for the first week or so.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for, man. That's why you bought a Thunder laser.
Sooner or later, I'll get this shit down, Brian. I promise. But I'm just a nutcase about making sure I do stuff right. All right, so shift and then hit send. So we're still good to go, right? Just do that. We're
Still
ready
good to
to roll.
go.
All right, let's see what happens then. I just got to just left click send and then just let go of everything, right?
Yeah, it'll pop up a box, and you might want to rename it, put Lightburn 1 or delete the N or something like that, or it'll ask you to overwrite and all
Okay.
this stuff. Yeah.
Click it bear. That work? I just filled in file name bear.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. And click OK. Let's see what happens. Okay, there's a red light that came on the machine, and it's down here going crazy.
And hopefully it's in the right spot.
You know, you don't see anything on your on the computer grid moving back and forth or anything, do you?
No, once it's sent to the machine, the Lightburn doesn't have anything to do with it anymore.
I see. I see.
Now you were talking about putting one of the files to USB and then transferring it, and that's a possibility also. Let's say, for instance, you don't have internet out in your shop, or you don't have a computer out there. You can design your work and send it to your USB drive just like you would send it, and then you can plug your USB drive right into the laser and use it untethered. It doesn't have to be connected to a computer either. So that's an option
Yeah,
as
because
well.
I see there's the next one up says USB stick.
Yeah.
And see, that's what I do on my water jet machine. I actually don't have any internet. I never had internet over to the machine in that part of the building.
Right.
And so everything that's been loaded on that machine, I usually get off the computer, put on a USB stick, come over and stick it in the computer, and then load it onto the computer on the machine.
Yeah. So,
and that's how I do that. And you're saying this can do the same thing?
Yeah, see the laser tab here we're under, and you've got start and send and all that. Under there, you can say save RD file.
Okay.
If you click that, it's going to open up a window, and you find your USB drive and name the file something.
Yeah.
Drop it right on your USB drive, and then you can take your USB drive and plug it into that UDISC port on the controller and select the file from the controller and run it.
You have to do all this through the computer?
Well, you have to.
Are you saying if there's a file? I see. If there's a file already in here on the that's on the Lightburn.
Yeah, if
you can take and you're sending save that RD file. Can't you just save it to your desktop, or do you have to just save it to a USB?
Well, you can, but the only way to get it over there, if you're not tethered, is to put it on a USB eventually to get it to the machine if you're not tethered. But yeah, if I hit save RD file, look, just for instance, we'll call this Bear.
Yeah.
And let's just have it go to your desktop. You can delete it later. And it's going to save it as an RD file. So you can go get your thumb drive, drag that file into your thumb drive, then put your thumb drive in the laser and call the file up from the controller and run it just like hitting send, except it's remote. You could have it in your pocket, walk up to anybody's laser, anybody with a Ruida controller with the same laser, as long as the size and wattage are similar. You could run it up to somebody else's Nova 24.
RD.
Yeah. And that's
Bear RD. And usually I just right click on those and send to the drive when I have it plugged in.
Yeah, that's exactly how you would do it. Mm-hmm.
I got it. Okay. Okay, so I'm still watching this thing. Actually, I haven't been watching. Wife's over here watching it. So the little bear is all the white-looking part.
Yeah.
And the little heart and the nose and the eyeballs are still dark.
Yep.
Like the regular stuff. That means that stuff sticks up above it a little bit. Okay. Mm-hmm. Bear's almost done.
And you can invert the bear also. There's a lot of stuff you can do once you get the basics. You can play around with layers and putting other outlines around it and inverting it and do all kinds of neat stuff. So and there's a bunch of tutorials on
now it's
on
cutting
that.
It out. It cut the little circle first.
Mm-hmm.
So did it know how to? Did it know to just cut any inside cuts first automatically?
Yes.
See, because when you do a water jet, you manually you can do what's called an auto path, but it's usually some kind of a mess because you got lines crossing all over shit. You never know if it's gonna hit a piece, but it usually manually path that. Like if I had a hole that needed to be cut out, but then the external thing cut out, I have to do that first.
Right.
I have to do that manually. I would go in and do what I would say an inside cut on a circle, and then if there was something outside of that circle that was going to be cut, that would be your last cut.
And you can do that by layer also.
It knows how to do that automatically.
Yeah, you see the window I've got up on the optimization settings?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I've got cut inner shapes first turned on.
I see. Okay, I didn't know that was there. Okay, so I see. So cut inner shapes first. I see. Reduce travel move. Okay, got it. That's where was that little piece at, bud?
Right under the show last position.
Optimization settings? Okay, I see.
Yep.
I see.
Another way you could do it is to make each of your, like if you were going to do an O, if it was an O and you wanted an inside and an outside, you could make them two different colors and then arrange them in your cuts and layers, so that they're in the right order that you want them. You can do it that way. But most of the time, the software handles all that for you.
Okay. Well, it makes sense if it's cut inner shapes first. See, one nice thing about this machine versus a water jet is you don't have to worry about anything popping up out of the hole and crashing into the head.
Right.
See, and that's why it doesn't necessarily matter which inner shape gets cut first. I'm sure it probably does it optimally to whichever one is the closest one.
Yeah.
Next to each other. Is that kind of how it does it?
Yeah, I'm not real sure about it, the in-depth part of the motion planning, but yeah, all of that stuff is taken into account. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it doesn't really matter. This thing's so damn fast anyway. Well, the wife just pulled that thing out, the little bear, and it's cute as a little button. Yeah, that's cool as hell. No shit. Well, this works good. Whatever settings we got, it did the cut just right.
All right, let's do something real quick. Well, we have settings in our cuts and layers, and that line is perfect, evidently, for 1/4 inch and cutting, and we don't have 1/4 inch listed here. So let's add it to the library. You were asking about that. So what I'm going to do is highlight that layer that you want to keep those settings. You've dialed it in, and those are perfect, and that's what you want. So we're going to create new from layer, and that layer is highlighted. So when we select create new from layer, it's going to ask a material name. Now, you have to, if you want it to be underneath acrylic, you have to type acrylic the same way, and it's case sensitive, I believe. So you need to make it go exactly the same as what that says. Otherwise, it'll make a new category.
Okay.
So, and there is going to be a thickness, and it's 0.25. Let me.
Okay, you're adding another item to our acrylic list.
Right, and I'm going to call it cut. And then I'm going to hit OK.
Okay, I get.
And now,
that is our cut.
If you look under acrylic, now you have 1/4 inch, and there's your cut.
0.250 cut. I got it. Okay, so then what I see, so you just highlighted this thing up here, brings that stuff in here, and you're assigning all that information. So now, like the fill is perfect also. I guess, or whatever. Say the fill's okay. Is that already in there, or do we need to, or can you add the fill in the same way you did?
We use this one for fill, so it's already in the library.
Okay, and that's just called engrave.
Right, because the thickness doesn't matter.
We don't know what that is. I mean, can you change that engrave? Say if I thought this thing was too light, it wasn't engraved deep enough.
Yeah.
What would I do to add it to engrave it deeper?
Well, if you want to change the setting that's in your library because you want to make a global change and always remember it, you can highlight engrave. It's already highlighted. Now go over to edit cut.
Okay. Click on it.
Uh-huh.
Edit cut.
Yep. Now you can
Okay.
save it. You can change it right there. Let's say that it's too deep. So maybe we want to drop it. And I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. I'm not dropping it enough to hardly make a difference. Okay?
Okay.
But we've changed it, and I'm going to hit OK. But now here's the kicker. You got to hit save over here or it won't save it into the library.
Okay. Does it show it now up here as changed?
No,
One of these numbers changed?
no, but I tell you, you can pick the fill layer, go down to engrave, assign it to layer, and you'll watch it go from 16 to 15. Boom.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. Assign to layer. Okay. Well, it's a little interesting. It's going to take me a little bit. I see kind of some of the stuff you're doing, but there's a lot more little clicks you got to do to make things happen on this thing.
Yeah. And pretty much everything you need is in here, including if you use CorelDRAW, there's a macro setup. Do you know about that?
I don't know about CorelDRAW really.
Okay.
I've never used it before.
Okay. Well, if you ever get to using it, all this does is streamline it where when you're designing in CorelDRAW, instead of exporting the file and then opening Lightburn and then importing the file into Lightburn, there's a macro you can set up in CorelDRAW. As long as it's not the home or student edition, it's got to be the full-blown edition or it won't run a script. And you can set up a script in there where it puts a Lightburn icon in your toolbar of CorelDRAW. So when you're done with your design in CorelDRAW, you click one button and it opens up in Lightburn for you automatically.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. Well, I think I'm just gonna have to kind of play with this stuff a little bit. I'm probably gonna, and I think probably doing a little bit of reading on here. Where's the best place? I mean, to get a lot of the information is just right in here on the. Well, you got quick helps and notes, online documentation. Kind of just go through some of those and maybe watch some of that guy's videos too.
Yeah, watch the videos. And all of the videos may not be here, but go to his YouTube channel. Go to the Lightburn YouTube channel, and there's all kinds of videos. And the support forum is the reigning champion of all questions and all support for Lightburn. So that support forum, you'll pretty much find everything you need to know in there. If it's not in there, you can post to the forum, and they're very responsive. They'll get right back to you. Not right back, you know what I mean, within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
So
now, now this laser went back to where we originally left it. If we wanted to send it, what we would call home would be where the original upper far left extents were. Is there like a home button or a place you send it, or would you just manually move it over?
See, I've been used to using, except for the past year, I've been used to using the G-code version of Lightburn, and it's a little bit different. But there's all kinds of stuff in here, and you might have a setting to send it completely home when you're done. That may be something in the controller that has to be set. I'm not positive where that is.
But you can, I just moved it now, so I can, if I move this and hold that button, will it stop automatically?
Yes.
When it hits its hard stop?
Yes. If it doesn't, you'll know it.
Okay, and it's not going to hurt it any if I hold that button? Huh?
If it doesn't, you'll know it. Because it'll make a big noise. But no, you don't have to try to stop it. You can hold the button down and it'll stop on its own in any direction.
Okay, good. Yeah, it does. I just didn't want it to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you hear that, call me.
Okay, so that's far upper. It does. Well, I'll tell you what, man. On a water jet, you got to be careful. I mean, these things. It's a $40,000 head that sits on top of this thing, and you don't want to go crashing this son of a gun into the steel, into the steel side of this thing. And if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, you can. So that's why those things home, when we first initially fire these things up, it asks you, do you want to auto home the machine first?
Right.
And when I learned how to do this from the Omax guys, they come over and the tech comes over here and spends a day with you, and so you always auto home the machine so it's at its far extent to where it can possibly go to its stops. You know? Because you could actually run the head all the way over into the wall if you want to.
I see.
But you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Not when everything on the machine costs $1,000. I don't care if it's a screw,
Right.
it's $1,000.
So that's why we set the workspace so specifically in here, because technically this laser has two. It has an X homing sensor and or an end stop and a Y end stop, and that's it. And they're both in that far corner where they home when you first fire up the machine. So if you have your, let's say for instance, it doesn't have sensors going the other direction. So if your bed size is input incorrectly, let's say your bed size is 700 across instead of 600, it'll crash because it doesn't know to stop. It thinks it hasn't gone far enough yet. So, but all your settings are right, so it should maintain its coordination without any problem.
Okay. Now we're all set up in. That's the other thing I was going to tell you. So as far as this thing being set up for its working area, you have this set up in millimeters, right?
Not now. I switched to inches, but
okay. So, so I'm trying to figure out where that's
right here.
At in here.
You can toggle from inch to millimeter, at random here, anywhere you want, and that's a global change.
Oh, okay. So, but the actual original settings for the working area were put in somewhere else, right?
Yeah, during the device
setup.
setup.
You just toggle between millimeters and inches, and it knows how to adjust for that.
Correct. I'll show you. So here's the device, and you said you had a 24.
Yeah.
How did those get off?
Right there.
Those are off.
Oh.
Your X is 600, and your Y is 400. How did that get off?
I don't know.
All right, so let's go back to inches. Go back to devices and see if it's in inches now. Yeah.
Yeah, 23.62. Yeah, that's correct. Okay.
So, I normally work in millimeters just because that's the way everything is. And that's just the way I've always been. But typically, you can toggle back and forth right here, and it'll be fine. And that also affects the library. You'll be able to see those changes affected, and it'll collapse all your windows again. But like just for an instance, there's 2.765 inches. If we switch to millimeters, it's gonna collapse all of them again. But if you go back and look, now they're going to be in millimeters. So these are global changes here.
I see. But also, if you look at your grid square here, shouldn't that be set up at? Okay, now we're in inches. Shouldn't this be at 26 point whatever inches? Probably from corner to corner. Is that right?
It should be.
But when you go to millimeters, hang on here, Brian. Let me have that.
Okay.
If you go to millimeters, you said it was 600 by 400. Okay, so 560. So I guess if we come over to the right, that's supposed to be 600 at the far right corner up there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I see 400 does come to this edge here.
Mm-hmm.
There. Okay. All right. Okay. I was just wondering, to pay attention maybe to the numbers on the grid too, because you just said you went back in and looked at that thing, and that thing was like at 869 millimeters.
Yeah, I don't know
how the hell did that change.
I don't know. That's something I might bring up, but I think we can even, you can. Let's see. If we get a pencil tool and we go over here and just make a little box. I can't see the entire. You should be able to see your live coordinates as you move the cursor around. I don't see where it is. I think it's at the bottom, and I can't see the bottom of the screen. But you should. Let me get back to here. I believe, and let me go to default window again, see if I can bring it back up. See, the palette's gone again. And that might be my remote thing. Okay, there we go. Now, if you look down in the bottom, you can see your coordinates change in real time at the very bottom left. So if we get right up here close, it's close.
Just say the X and Y.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you move, that's where your cursor arrow's at.
Right.
So if you move your cursor arrow to the very upper right corner, shouldn't that be at 26 point whatever?
It should be close. That's what's weird. Let me see something. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back in devices because I want to see. I want to see what happened. I want to see if they're off again. You did say you had a Nova
Okay.
24. Let me go back to millimeters because I know 600 by 400 is it. So let's go back to devices. No, I didn't want to click that. Cancel. I want to get back in this one. Next. Next. Okay, it's right.
And you're still set up there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It was just a glitch. It should be okay.
Yeah.
So we'll pop.
Maybe we got to always next out of it too. I think
maybe. So
that might save it too. I don't know.
yeah. So
But that's weird though. So then when you go to inches, if we go to inches up here and go to millimeter, now you said that stuff moves in real time. You should go up to that corner, shouldn't you? And shouldn't it be like 600?
yeah. Well, the bottom.
Pretty close. 599.46.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah. So I would say that's close enough. Now the inch one though, is it only? Maybe it is only supposed. Is it only supposed to be 23 up there for the working area? I might have to look at my.
Let me pull it back up. I've got it. Let's see.
Oh, you just took it. Okay.
No, I'm opening a browser tab. I'm going to pull out, get my dimensions out for these machines and see which one it is. The Nova 24.
I've got the owner's manual for that on my machine or on this laptop too.
Yeah, 600 by
And it did show
400
working area.
or 23.6 by 15.7.
That's what it was. 23.6. So it wasn't 26.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so it's correct.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, if you go up here, up to the corner edge, yeah, it's 23.6.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, and then down here,
Yep.
wait a minute. How come it's not showing my? Oh, it should be. Wait a minute. No, yeah, 15.7.
Yep.
No, that's right.
That's
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So I noticed my little fans just came on my chiller. Even
Mm-hmm.
they just come on sometimes when they want to, or what?
Yeah, it's keeping it within the range. I think it's an
So in other words,
intelligent.
when the machine's on, the laser tube's still on back there.
No, the tube, if the tube's not firing, it's not doing anything. It adjusts and it may cycle. It may just cycle just a cycle, but I think they come in intelligent mode, which means they're set to go plus or minus 5 degrees of whatever the ambient temperature is. So if you've got that in an area that is really hot in the summer,
Right.
like I am, it gets 98 degrees in here sometimes. I can't use intelligent mode because then it'll get me over above 100 degrees if it goes 5 degrees over what the ambient temp is. So
Oh, okay.
there's a way that
Okay.
you can change the settings in your chiller on the controller there on the chiller, so that it is a set point where you can set it at 20 degrees and then it'll stay within 5 degrees of 20 degrees no matter what happens. Unless it freezes, it can't heat up, of course. But as far as the cooling goes, it'll keep it within 5 degrees of the set point.
Okay. So what's the stuff on the front? Because they didn't really give you any, owner's manual doesn't give you a lot of other things. And I didn't know on the front of this thing, like right now, the fan's just turned off and it says 19.3C.
Mm-hmm.
But also up here you got an arrow button that shows up arrow with RST.
Mm-hmm.
An arrow button below that says set and it points down.
Mm-hmm.
What are those two buttons for?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I've used them before, but if you'll look on your screen real quick, we're back in our Thunder Laser page, and if you'll type chiller in there, in the smart search.
Okay, I'm up here at the computer. Okay.
Yeah.
I see chiller. Oh, okay. Connection kit, requirements, maintenance manual, user manual.
There you go. That's where all
Is
those
that the one
settings will be.
I've got? Yeah, I've got the CW5000.
Mm-hmm. It's the
Yeah,
same.
okay.
They use the same temperature controller in all the CW series machines, so the settings
I see.
will be the same. So there's your user's manual, even a maintenance manual on it if you need it.
Oh, okay.
There's all kinds of information in this site that I've put in here, but the problem is it's just not really easy to navigate. So that's why I added that smart search. So
Okay, so a lot of times just try and search for a typical word that you would be looking for.
right, and it'll pop up with any relevant.
Chiller. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And I was kind of curious. Well, since we got this, I'm going to open this thing up. You told me about say, I guess we're done cutting for a minute. So now, if I want to Z down to get this stuff out of my way, I basically need to push the ZU button to get into that mode, right?
Correct.
One time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now here's Z move, U move. Um, what the hell is U move?
That is your rotary. We use the U channel for the rotary device.
Oh, cause that's something different. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So right.
Most lasers use the Y channel, which takes your Y axis out of play, so it doesn't move. A lot of these clones and a lot of these lasers, you either have to have a complicated multi-position switch, or you have to actually unplug the Y motor that drives your gantry and plug the rotary into it. And ours, we've got
Okay.
special firmware in it that Ruida made for us, so that we can use that spare channel, so that you don't have to take your X and Y out of play.
Oh, I see. Well, it looks like inside the machine too. There's even a little tab, yellow tag says rotary, and there's a plug-in
Mm-hmm.
deal there. I don't think I have those pieces of cabling, do I? That comes when you get the rotary thing.
Correct. The rotary will have that 7-pin XLR connector on it, and it's self. I mean, it's automatic. You plug the chiller in. I mean, the rotary in, and the machine knows that it's connected. So you don't
Yeah,
have.
the light or light burn recognizes that
Well,
information.
not Lightburn won't recognize it, because you'll still have to turn your rotary on in Lightburn. And I'm going to fix this for you real quick in case you ever get to the rotary. They don't know by
Okay.
default that it's not on the front screen, but I'm going to turn on Show Rotary Enable on the main window. And what that does is add your rotary switch here. Just make sure that's not turned on if you're not using the rotary, or you get some really weird stuff going on. If you get your coordinate system all out of whack and it's doing crazy stuff, make sure that's not on.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Only used when you're using it.
Correct.
Okay, so now I'm at the point where I lowered down my work area, the table,
Mhm.
and you were telling me about the little light yellow. If you run your hand across that little beam, that little red light, that's not going to do anything to you, right?
No, turn your laser switch off just in case.
I'll turn the laser switch off.
That'll prevent the tube from firing at all. There's no way it can fire. It's not getting power.
Oh, I see. That's basically what that does then. It allows that to come into play to fire the tube. With it off, you cannot fire it. So it's kind of a default or just a safety feature.
It
almost.
is. It completely
Okay,
disconnects
gotcha.
main power to the laser power supply.
I see. Gotcha. I understand now. Okay, you were talking about the air assist control, and we thought now we can maybe play with that for just a second.
Sure.
Okay, I just pushed the test on high volume,
Mm-hmm.
and I can feel air coming down through there.
Mm-hmm.
So if I turn this button, okay, I feel it going down to the right.
Yeah. Clockwise
It's
closes.
hard to say.
Yeah. Clockwise closes the needle valve, and left or counterclockwise opens it.
Oh, it does. Okay. Now there's no. Oh, wait a minute. There is kind of a little set screw here too,
There's a lock.
or kind of a lock screw. Do I undo that too?
I'd unlock them both, and we can set them real quick. Then you can lock them back down.
Yeah. Okay. Just bring that up a little bit so now you can turn the needle valve. So you're saying to the right is closing it?
To the left open, and to the right closes. Yes.
Yeah. So you're putting the seat down.
Correct.
Further.
Yeah, it's a needle
Does
valve.
it bottom out at all, Brian?
It will.
Does
You can
bottom out
you,
into a seat.
yeah, you can turn it all the way down. Don't crank on it too hard. You'll break that needle off in there.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, let me go ahead. Just click the test then, and then I just wanted to see if it. Okay, I can feel it now. So it's barely blowing. Bring it up.
and make sure you're on the engrave or the low stage, not the cut stage. If you're in the cut stage, of course, you want it pretty much wide open. So
I'm not sure how far wide open is. Well, I don't know. You mean I got to be on the light burn stuff right now to do something with it, or?
no,
These?
there's two buttons. They're different. One button is for low, and one button is for high. There's two green buttons. Okay, yeah. So on the high volume, you want your needle, your valve to be all the way to the left as far as it'll go, wide open. No, no. You won't unscrew. If you're strong enough to do that with your fingers, then I have some things I need you to do for me. But no, it shouldn't. down, and you're
Okay.
good on
Yeah,
that
and
one.
then go ahead and set your lock screw down.
Mm-hmm. And then set
Understand.
yeah, and then set your engrave side where you just get a nice little whiff of air. You just want positive pressure inside the nozzle so the smoke won't go in there. That's the idea.
Okay. Let me see where it's at now. Maybe they preset it as factory flow. Well, it's just low volume, and I can just barely feel it. I mean, I can stick my finger up against the bottom of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of feel it go poof, poof,
Yeah,
poof, just a hair.
that's about all you need. Mm-hmm.
Okay, just a little tiny poof, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'd probably just leave it there.
Yeah, and if you notice when you're doing wood, if you see a lot of smoke, you may want to increase it a little bit just to help evacuate that smoke a little bit. So it can be for
Okay.
smoke assist too. But on acrylic, you don't typically want very much air. Otherwise, it can cause those that white powder to actually adhere back to it. So,
I see what you're saying.
which you can clean it up,
Okay.
and that's something you'll
Okay.
have to play with. That's another one of those deals where it's a rabbit hole. It depends on the material, on what your air is, and what kind of result you want. So you'll have to play with it a
Okay.
little bit. Honestly,
So the low volume automatically will be on or being used doing the fill stuff, the etching portions of it.
correct.
Okay, and then when it moves over into a line or cut, it knows to switch over to the high volume air, and it's using the high volume on your cut lines.
Correct. And the way to toggle that is in your layers. If air assist is on, it's high volume. If air assist is off, it's low volume. So you'll have to toggle those switches in there.
Okay. But you would want, but aren't they all under? Is there a specific setting just for line where you would leave just that on? Is that right? Or
Yeah, if you're going to cut, you want air assist to be turned on.
okay, so this is cut. Okay, so if whatever line we choose in, I understand. Okay, so our blue has been chosen as a line cut, and will probably remain that unless we change to that some other color for cutting, right?
Right.
It will stay as a blue. We can
The-
always use blue,
the-
and we're gonna look, and that's our cut. So you want your air assist on,
Now,
and
here's the thing about cutting, and the reason we don't call these, that's the reason he changed the names. They used to be cut and fill, or cut and etch, or cut and engrave, or something like that. He changed them to fill and line because a lot of times you'll want to engrave lines and not cut them. The only difference between a cut and an engrave is how much power and speed you use.
okay,
If you use very little power and higher speed, you're going to get an engrave because it's just not going to cut all the way through. You're not putting the power to it enough. You see what I mean?
I gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So,
okay. So what's a good? For instance, say a guy doesn't know for sure he's got a 1/4 inch piece of hickory plywood or just wood or whatever, and you're saying, okay, I wanna cut through that. Well, let's say if something like that isn't in your library, you've got your max power, min power. I mean, where is a good starting point if you're not sure? You're saying, well, I don't know. I mean,
well,
it's a 1/4 inch piece of wood. What's it going to do to it?
right. Well, that's where there's a lot of trial and error here. On dialing it in, and even if you bought, let's say, ply, for instance, is one of the hardest things to cut because you've got different orientations of the strands, and you've got multiple layers. You've got knots. You've got air pockets. You've got glue pockets. You got different thicknesses of glue, different types of adhesives. So even two different pieces of 1/2 inch plywood will cut totally differently. One may do great, and one might not cut all the way through half of it. And that's ultimately going to boil down to you actually doing tests with different speeds and powers on all the materials until you get what you want. And some note taking or using the library or something like that, or using material test cards and keeping them are one of the best ways to do that. There's a test card in the Lightburn forum. You can look up material test cards or material tests. And what it does, it makes an array of different circles or squares or whatever, and it engraves part of them and it cuts part of them, and it uses different speeds and powers. And you can actually see just in a real quick test what kind of results you're going to get out of what speed and what power. It does a range so that you can see which ones cut all the way through and which ones don't. And You know,
Okay. Well, the best thing to probably do, I mean, is just say you have a piece to test with,
uh-huh.
is to basically same thing like the water jet. You can do it, but most of my stuff's already set up. I already know where that's going to cut through or not.
Right.
But if you don't have any idea, then yeah, you have to test it.
Yeah. I cut little
But if you were,
circles.
say you have a piece of quarter inch, say you have a piece of quarter inch hickory, plywood, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
laminate or whatever, and I think the best thing to do is just make a small square, maybe 3 inches, with maybe something on the inside of it, and one would be just a fill,
Mm-hmm.
and one would be your cut. And I guess just test it. If the thing doesn't quite cut all the way through, you're going to want to up some power or
Lower the
slow
speed,
down the
or
speed. I'm
both,
assuming.
or both. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
Well, what do you normally do when you're testing that? Do you use power to to gain that extra amount if you're not quite cutting through, or would you adjust them both a little at a time, or what?
yes, all of the above. There's not. I
All
don't
of the
have a
above.
set. The material test cards really help, and if I have a material that I'm not sure about, I'll pull something that I think is close from the library, and see how it
Uh-huh.
does, and then I'll look at the results and see what I need to do to change. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
literally going to be a lot of trial and error, and wasting a little bit of material. Of course, how you do your test can determine how much you waste. I've found it for some reason a really great idea when I was testing my rotary to buy a box of mugs, and I burnt 12 mugs up just learning how to do a mug, at $8 a piece, when I probably could have
Uh-huh.
put some tape around them, and etched real lightly just to kind of see what was going on first. But so there's different ways to go about these tests, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, see, I'm just looking down here now. Okay, so one is, I'm like down on I clicked open plywood, for
Hmm.
instance, and I'm just seeing a couple things under there.
Right.
That's under, so is that under my, do I have to click this one, the blue or the other one to tell me which one I'm looking at?
No, you're
If
not.
I do that,
Your
okay.
library, without looking at without opening one of those things in the library and looking at edit cut, you're not going to know what those settings are. You can't see the settings in the library unless you open it. See, the library is totally different than your cuts and layers up there. Your cuts and layers are your settings for the current job with the layers that you have, and the library is just a bunch of presets. And
Okay.
so you just go through the presets and set them to those layers up there. So,
So, oh boy. Because I guess what I was getting at was if I had that quarter-inch piece of wood and I wanted to cut it,
mhm.
but it wouldn't cut quite all the way through. I'm trying to remember how you go to.
Oh yeah, I
So look,
see. You're saying if you have this selected and you put it in there and it didn't cut all the way, and you want to change your library setting, is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So right now, I mean, well, for instance, those aren't even in these settings, are they? I'm just saying if we were
Right.
going to say we're going to plywood and we want that as a cut,
Yep.
don't we got to click on one of these to make that go up into this thing?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So once you select your layer up there, your blue layer.
Okay, so
Now,
I select it, right, like that.
yeah, and now go down to
Okay,
that cut and click it.
just click cut.
Click it,
Okay,
and then go to assign to layer, and it'll assign that library setting to that layer.
okay, this one right here, or
Cut. You're already on it. You already clicked
okay.
it.
Oh, I see. I see what. Okay, hang on a minute, Brian. I'm just trying to remember what I'm doing. Okay,
Sure.
so
Sure.
I get it. So open the plywood.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, then, okay, that dimension 0787 is open and selected as the cut. If I went to this one and selected that,
Nothing will
then that
happen.
would be the cut for that
Yes.
size, right?
Yes. Correct. Correct.
Okay, and then you select, say, cut. Then you go up here to assign to layer, which is assigning it up to here.
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so now that's assigned. That thickness is assigned up to our cut line that went up
Correct.
here.
The library settings for
Uh,
that material are set to your layer now. Correct.
okay, okay. So what do we know? So that's say that's for that plywood, that thickness of plywood. Now, what about our fill thing? Are we going down? What if you wanted to do a etch into the plywood? Is there something else you're doing down here?
Etch
I
is
thought
no.
before it showed engrave on something here.
Well, no thickness, because etching it has no thickness because it doesn't matter. So open
so
up.
You click on no thickness.
And it'll open up to the engraved one. You have to click the arrow
For the plywood, for that plywood.
for the plywood. Yeah, and that'll work. That could probably work on anything. It might work on plywood. It might work on MDF. It might work on walnut. It might, you know what I mean? Because it's engraving. It's a little different. But yeah, you have to click the arrow and drop it down where you can get to what's inside the no thickness. See, it's not expanded yet. There you go.
Oh, there.
Now click engrave. Yeah, so click engrave. Now go up to the top and click your layer, your black layer. And then assign to layer, and it'll assign those to it. But
okay, that's what I was getting at, because that's changed. This is changing our speed and power settings for that particular item that you were trying to work with, which was plywood.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I kind of wanted to know how to do that.
Yeah, you have to drill all the way down in that tree. Yeah.
Huh?
You have to drill all the way down, in those submenus until you get to the thing.
Okay. I think I kind of got that. So now, what if say the line one up here, it's got 15.0, 6.0. What if we say that we find out, it's not quite cutting through quarter-inch plywood.
Okay.
But we want to do that, and then we want to save it down under plywood. And can we put the .250 plywood or make a new file? I mean, I don't know. Can you make a complete new file that you would call something else?
So let's say that we go in here and these settings didn't work for us, and we discovered that we needed to drop down to 10. Okay. And we tried those settings, and we know they work, and it's for quarter-inch plywood. We have it selected. We can create We can create a new library entry from that layer, and when you do that, you could call it plywood.
The layer is what you're calling a layer. Is this line layer that we just had? That's called a layer.
Correct.
I got it.
And then that would be quarter-inch.
.250.
And hit OK, and now it's added right here.
There it is. I see. Okay. So now that's our new setting for our .250.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now let's say for instance you did that and you tried it and it's too hot. It's cutting too much. You're getting blowback from the back. It's flashing back off the bed or something, and reflecting back onto the wood. And you need to lower the power again. And you want to save that. You want to change it in the library. So you can go to Edit Cut and you can say, okay, that was a little hot. So I'm going to speed it back up again, which what I'm actually doing, I think, is taking it back to where it was. I think it was at 15 on speed. And then OK. And we've changed that now globally in the library, but you have to save it, remember? Or it won't save it to the library.
Okay.
Any changes you make in the library, you have to hit save after.
Okay. Yeah. Well, probably also when you bring that up, you're going to see, if you're not doing that right, you're not going to get that setting back up here, because it shows your speed and power setting up here too.
Right. Changing it in the library has no effect on the layers whatsoever. You have to assign those to the layers as you need them. So the library is a totally independent file. It has nothing to do with what's going on here, other than you can import those settings into the layers when you want to.
Okay. And then so to change that, was that a double click you did on that? Okay, yeah, you just double click that. I mean, this is our speed setting for the travel.
Right.
And then max power. Now, so you got max power, min power.
Mm-hmm.
What's these are both at 60.
Yeah.
What does min power mean? It's not going to go below the max power, or what?
So in this instance, when you're looking at a cut that you're going to do, what the minimum power means is if your head drops below 10 millimeters per second, let's say that you are cutting out a big hello and it's cursive letters, and it has to slow down to make those tight corners and things like that, to follow around the lines and things like that. A lot of times the machine will have to slow down. Even if you tell it you want it to go 100 millimeters per second, that doesn't mean it's going to when you're cutting. It may have to slow down. So if your speed drops below 10 millimeters per second, and this is a perfect a perfect example. Let's say your min power is set to 40.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen here is let's make the speed 9. If we make the speed 9, the max power all of a sudden doesn't matter because it's below 10 millimeters per second. So if you have it set like this, your max power, you can put 100 on there, it ain't going to matter because your speed is never going to reach 10 millimeters per second. And I'll tell you the reason for this. When you're cutting some things, if you keep the max power and min power the same, as it goes to slow down to go around a corner or to trace around a letter and goes below 10 millimeters per second, it can overburn those. It can blow out the corners. Like if you're trying to cut a really sharp square, when it gets up close to that corner, it has to slow down so it can change directions. And if it slows below 10 millimeters per second and you have your minimum power and max power the same, and you're noticing that it's cutting off the corners, blowing them out, burning off the corners where they're not sharp, you can turn your minimum power down a little bit so that when it starts to slow down, it's only going to output maybe 40%. It's still going to cut through because you're going slower, but it's not going to overburn that area. So that's what that's for. Honestly, for all intents...
So is min power affected by it? So does the speed affect the minimum power on the laser?
That's exactly what affects it. If the head drops below 10 millimeters per second, it's going to use your minimum power setting instead of the maximum.
Okay, I understand. So maximum power up there would be also the max speed on the head moving.
No. Well, yeah, but max power is anything from 11 millimeters per second to 1,000 millimeters per second.
Okay, but what I'm getting at is it's going to be you would be used along with the maximum speed, max power. Like if it's traveling in a straight line, it's going to use the maximum power, provided that maximum power is correct.
Right.
But as it came around to a corner, a tight U-shaped S-bend or something,
it'll drop to 40.
The machine head has to slow down in order to make the cut a little bit. But you're saying if it could be on max power and it slows down too much, it might start burning it up. So you would just drive down your minimum power a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the speed is slowed down.
To compensate for the slower speeds. Yes. Correct.
Yep. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. And is that something you notice? I mean, what do you notice if it's going too fast, or I mean, if it's going too slow and too hot? Is what you're saying? What do you notice on those edges like that?
If you're cutting a square, you'll notice that it's not square anymore because it's stayed there. It's dwelled there so long that it's burned it up and it's just made an ugly cut. That's typically what, because as it slows down, it's going to stay there longer and it's going to burn longer. So, let's imagine you had
What I have to remember is, Brian, this is not a water jet exactly.
Sure.
The idea is the same. It does the same type of things.
Right.
But what we're dealing with is fire versus water.
Exactly. So, and here's the way I look at it. I always set my min power and max power the same when I'm doing normal cutting and engraving. If I notice, let's say I have a Q, and the little curly Q part of the Q looks like it's charred a little bit and it's thinner than the rest, I'll know that it's overburning and I'll drop my minimum power a little. I leave them all the same until I see a reason to change it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy thinking about it. So don't fix it if it ain't broke is the way I kind of approach it.
Right. But when you go down, so if you go down to, I mean, but these library pieces like under plywood or painted aluminum, marble, whatever, if you click in that, so you say, okay, well, I'm getting, like we went to acrylic. You know, you went to acrylic and you go, okay, well, I think it's close to this. When we clicked that on, that did, and then you went to cut, that did fill in our line area up here under cuts and layers. I mean, there's settings in that library that were used as a starting point.
Yes.
For what we think we're cutting, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I got it. Okay. Well, you know what, man? I at least got to cut a couple things out today, and I have held you on the phone for, I don't know, 2.5 hours now. So I think I'm going to let you go. Both these things turned out really cool, and I think I'm just going to I just wanted to make sure, Brian, that this thing ran and worked. It seems to function. As far as like turning this thing off and stuff, anything in particular to do? You just shut down laser switch first always, and then
Correct.
main power switch turns off, right?
Correct. Yep. Usually
Okay.
the way
And
I
then just
turn,
come over and you can just turn the chiller off, and
yeah,
that's it?
yeah. And my typical operation is I'll turn the chiller on, and then I'll turn the main power to the laser on, and then I'll turn the laser power on, and I'll do it in reverse, to turn everything off.
Okay. Same thing for shutdown
Right.
on it. Okay. Okay. And this thing, yeah, and then I like I said, it doesn't have an automatic home, but you can just run your Z buttons all the way over and in the upper left corner, and
You can.
and
And I
up
think
and
there
down.
may be a
Okay.
way to make it go home. I'll have to check on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, not too big a deal, but yeah. Oops, hang on a second. Hey, there, I got two for you there, bud. You got anything for me? Nothing? All right, bud. Take care. Yep. Perfect. Well, bud, I hope that you don't mind. You're probably going to hear from me for a while.
that's cool. That's cool. That's what they pay me for, man.
You know.
And even if they
But
didn't,
This was. I shut down my Etsy store. I had to shut it down because these people were going crazy buying all these wind chime things that I make on my water jet. And here the laser had been sitting here for over a month and a half, and I keep looking over at it, and I'm going, shit. I go back. We just got to I just shut my Etsy store off about 2 days ago. Finished up all the rest of the work that I had. It's all done, and I said, I'm just turning the store off because I want to go play with this laser.
yeah, yeah, I totally get
I
it.
haven't even got to touch it yet.
So awesome.
So, yeah, this was fun, man. I can't believe how fast this thing cuts. Holy shit! This thing is freaking cool as hell.
They're neat.
So anyway, I think I know I'm gonna be able to get used to all this stuff. It's just this software and some of the things, Brian, are a little different to me. It's
Sure.
a little new to me. It's kind of like a water jet, but it's not quite like a water jet.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
a little bit different. But I think what we're going to try to do is me and the wife, we're going to try to maybe just start. We're trying to come up with some things for another new Etsy store, and what we were thinking of trying to do to start was maybe do some leather kits, like making just like wallet kits or purse kits.
Sure.
So this would be basically just maybe sheets of say 1/8-inch thick leather that we'd be laying on there, and then I guess design the files and bring those in. And probably most of these pieces would be little pieces, patterns that would be cut out. You know how just all the little pieces of the wallets,
Right.
and it'd have the little holes cut in it for where the people stitch them together and that type of stuff.
Sure.
So is there stuff in here, a starting point for like leather material and stuff?
I don't know.
Yeah. There it is, leather. You just passed it. There's one. Leather. 0.0591. So point 0.0591. That is 0.5 is a half inch. 0.059. Shit, what's 0.059? I can't even think right now. That's 0.062.
Oh, that's 1.5
16th
millimeters.
of an inch.
Yeah, that's 1.5 millimeters. It's pretty thin.
That's really thin.
Yeah.
Yeah, really thin.
So,
okay.
logic would dictate if it's twice that thick, either double your power or cut your speed in half or move your power up by 25% and move your speed down by 25%. Something like that.
Okay.
And then you'd have to wing it from there until you get the best result.
Okay. Because what we were thinking of doing was maybe making some kits where, along with like an instruction manual, so where basically you just cut out the wallet pieces and then like, where you put your credit cards in there.
Right.
You'd have all those little pockets that were cut. But also what we were going to do is offer like an option that they couldn't do is if they wanted their name engraved into. I guess keep calling it engraving. Is that what you're calling it, engraving?
Yeah.
Basically I call it etching or engraving into it. Like if they wanted their name engraved into it.
Sure.
We were going to offer them that option in the kit, and just we could burn that in. So some stuff like that. So I'm going to try and come up with some ideas and make some stuff myself, and I'll do my best to read and study as much as I can on the machine before I call you and bother you with a bunch of questions that that just waste your time. I don't like doing that to people. I'd like to try to at least try to understand how to operate something first, and once I can kind of get the gist of turning the thing on, actually making a file, actually seeing it work and it cuts, then I can kind of start to understand how the thing works. And then like you said, you're still playing around. I think you kind of have to.
Yeah.
I can't just call you and say, what's exactly the setting to cut this piece? Well, you don't know. You're going to go say, well, you have to just try it, so we'll just try and power it up a little or power it down. But at least you kind of gave me the basic rundown, and the machine fired up and worked, and that's really what I wanted to see done. Because I get a little worried about something like this, when you first started up. It's like me giving you a brand new $200,000 water jet machine and say, here you go.
Yeah. Exactly.
Have fun.
Sure. Sure.
You're gonna go, I don't think so. But that's one nice thing about Omax. When you pay that much money for something, they actually send a guy over for a day to set it up and do stuff with you.
Right. Right.
And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty nice when you spend almost $200,000. I'm glad you could send a guy over and show me how to use it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So
anyway, hey, I appreciate your time, and I'm going to be getting back in touch with you probably, I don't know, maybe the next few days or whatever. I'm sure I'll be a nuisance for you for a while until I start understanding this. But I just kind of wanted to make sure, Brian, that I wasn't going to get in here and start playing around with something and hurt this machine. I mean, is it kind of foolproof? I mean, in other words, you're not going to really be ramming the head into shit, or if something's off a little bit. I don't know. Those are things I worry about.
There are a lot of features in here that help prevent bad things from happening. One thing I'll tell you is when you're done manually focusing, put that head all the way back up to the stop again. In case you autofocus by mistake, if you have it drop 6 millimeters, you're going to be crashing your head.
I didn't even think about that. See, I didn't set that back. Never even thought about it. Remember, I did set that too when we did that. So, good idea. When you're finished done, reset the head all the way back up. Huh?
Yeah, you know what I did the other day? I put my 4-inch head in, and it's a good bit longer, an inch and a half longer than the standard head, and it actually touches the bed if the bed is up in the regular position. Actually, it goes beyond it or below it. And I didn't realize that I had my 4-inch head in, and I started the machine up, and it drug that 4-inch head all through my honeycomb and tore it all up. So I felt like an idiot. So yeah, I learned that.
Yeah.
So always replace, whenever you're doing anything with the head, always put it back to the autofocus. If you've got a different head in there, always put your stock head back in and reset it before you go to bed at night, because you might forget.
Okay. Well, one thing is, I think, because I don't see how it honestly takes that long to do stuff. I mean, to actually manually set the bed up, I'm so used to manually doing it, Brian, and for what amount of time I save doing an autofocus, I don't even know that I would really need to. It's not that much time.
The majority of laser guys do manual focus. I mean, a lot of the lasers, especially the eBay clones and stuff that people are getting, don't even have autofocus, and if they do have it, they're junk and they don't use them. So, it's a neat thing, but is it necessary? Nah, absolutely not. It is easier almost to drop your spacer in there, drop the head, and boom, you're ready to go, and you don't have to worry about it. So,
Now, one question is, for instance, you said, okay, 6 millimeters to focus this, because what you're doing, I mean, basically is, and I kind of understand it, is that beam actually does focus kind of more like a pinpoint as far as being a sharpness to it. It's actually a focus, so it makes a nicer cut, is what you're saying, even when it's etching or cutting.
Well, now
if that thing was pulled up higher, if it's an inch off of your work, what would it do? Wouldn't it kind of look like shit?
Yeah, it'd be a big fat burn. It'd be way out of focus. Now when I do a mug, I'll set my scan gap a little bit larger, and I'll pull out of focus a millimeter, and it smooths it out. It depends on the job. Now, here's another rabbit hole to jump down. When you're cutting, theoretically, you want to focus in the middle of the material, or as close as you can to it. That way, the optimum focal point will be in the middle of the work and not on top of it. We're focusing on top. And normally for most stuff that's fine. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're cutting 1/2 inch, you want to focus deep into that material so that your focal point is actually in the material, not on top. Otherwise, you'll get a tapered
Now,
cut.
I don't follow that exactly. Explain that.
Okay.
Focus in the middle of the material.
Yeah. So, all right, let's say for instance, you had a piece of 6 millimeter acrylic. You would want to focus 3 millimeters into the acrylic. So if your normal focus was your normal gap for your focus from the material, talking about just in general engraving, is 6 millimeters, you would actually want the distance from the head to the top of the material to only be 3 millimeters, so that your focal point is 3 millimeters into that material, which would be halfway through it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were 6 millimeters on the top of this one.
We were focused on the top. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So the other question too is that normal focus is on all materials. Is it the same? Say we were focusing on the top of a piece of leather, or the top of a piece of wood, or the top piece of acrylic. Is 6 millimeters the basis beginning point for all materials?
For that 2-inch lens, yes, that's correct.
For that lens, okay. And so, but if you, but I understand what you're saying. So yeah, this material, say, is 6 millimeters thick, and you actually want to try to focus into the center, so you're only going to pull it 3 millimeters off the top.
Correct.
Of the material, which actually focuses down in halfway into the material at 6
Correct.
millimeters.
Yeah, the reason is
And what's the reason for that?
the laser beam converges and diverges. It looks like an hourglass, and the skinniest part is your optimum focus. So if you have the skinniest part of your beam at the top and it's really thick, you're going to have a tapered cut because it's an hourglass shape. It's not a straight beam.
Yeah, so when it's cutting down to the bottom edge of that material, it's going out of focus.
Correct.
And it could do something to your edge quality, maybe?
Correct. Let me show you real quick.
Interesting. I never even thought about that.
Let me look at something real quick. This will give you a lot better. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Different heads. There we go. Where's the picture? No, that's using the different heads. That's not what I want.
How to manually adjust focus distance? I don't know.
I think I just found this. Let's see. Here we go. Comparison of different laser heads. There's your difference.
Okay. Get rid of that stuff.
So this is your standard head. You notice it looks like an exaggerated hourglass, but that's where the beam starts. Here, after it's focused, it actually focuses down to its smallest spot, and then it starts getting larger again pretty rapidly. So it'll actually make a little taper. It's just more efficient if you focus right in the center, because you want that section to be as even as possible. The 4-inch lens has
Are you looking at that as? Let me grab this mouse for a second.
Yeah.
Are you looking at that piece here as going straight up to the?
Yeah.
Would be your material laying across this way?
Well, let me see if I can find a better example real quick. And I think this might show it better. Let me go to my old site. I haven't been on here in forever. I spent years building this. Where is my smart search? Beginners. Here we go. This will probably give you a better example here. I go into a little bit on laser theory and stuff like that. mirrors and
Okay.
things like that. Okay, now here's a good example. There's your lens,
Okay.
and this is the part that's in focus. Your focal plane is the optimum focus right in the center. The depth of focus is the straightest part of that beam. So if you're
Uh-huh.
focusing on the top of a large piece of material and the focal plane is at the top of the material, by the time you start cutting through something thick, the bottom of your beam is wider at the bottom than it is at the top.
Uh-huh.
See?
Uh-huh. And what we're doing is looking at that piece that you just had. This would be your up. This would be straight up and down. Your material would have been laying across here, is what you're saying,
Yeah.
like this. Yeah. And then the beam gets wider
Yes.
down at the bottom of it.
Yeah. And
Okay,
and
I
the
get it.
and the
Yeah.
tolerance changes. You get a bigger, you get a flatter area, a wider focal plane, not a focal plane, but uh, the like this is a 4-inch lens. You notice how it's a lot skinnier. It looks a lot flatter than say
Mhm.
the 2-inch lens, which is what you've got. Where is it? Here's the 2-inch lens in the middle. This is what comes stock
Okay.
with them is a 2-inch lens. And so,
I see.
yeah, you want your material, the center of the material to be at the focal plane if you're cutting thick stuff. Now,
Okay.
you just cut that 1/4 inch, you probably won't notice a difference. You know, it's
Okay.
close enough. But if you're cutting half
Yeah, because
inch,
I'm looking now. I would only notice that on my cut, right? Because I'm
yes,
just looking at the edge here,
yeah,
and it's really hard to tell. I'd have to look very closely to see if there's a taper
right. Now, if
here
you
there.
cut a piece of 10 millimeter acrylic, you would see more of a taper. If you cut a piece of 20
Uh-huh.
millimeter acrylic, you would see an incredible amount of taper.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. And that's very interesting because see that kind of comes back a little bit to the water jet because I spent an extra 40 grand to get what was called it is called a tilt-a-jet head.
Hmm.
And if you just leave the cutting head on that perfectly straight so it doesn't tilt, when it cuts down through that side, what it does, same thing, water's a floppy tool though. So what it does, the deeper and deeper it goes, if it's straight, the edge will taper out
Yeah.
on it.
Okay. Yeah, because
The
it's
edge will
it's
taper
using up
out.
its energy and being dispersed when it's hitting the
Yep.
stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. It'll taper out. So what this head does is it automatically knows the compensation, so it tilts itself inward
Mm-hmm.
and compensates, and it cuts at the right speed for it, but it tilts the head inward. So when you're done cutting, that edge is 90 degrees
Yeah.
to your material.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, and so that's kind of like the same thing you're telling me by focusing halfway through the center of the material on this thing.
Right.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I didn't know. It's kind of, I guess, light bends. I don't know, but
Yeah. Yep. It does. So.
that's very interesting. Hey, one more question. I'm going to let you go. I'm sure I'll be talking to you a lot, but I did get one more of the little blue. I don't know what you want to call this thing. The head that screws onto the bottom. It's the blue one, but it's got a larger diameter hole in the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's a leftover, but you can use it for a test. The reason it's a leftover, these machines used to not have dual air assist, the dual stage. They only had one volume of air that would come out. It wouldn't be able to switch. And it wasn't, it was adjustable, but it wasn't easy to adjust. So what that nozzle is for is when you're engraving, it turns that air from a jet to a puff. That's all that nozzle does.
Oh.
And you don't need it now. So
Okay, so now we're using the air assist controls to do that.
yes, yeah,
Because what you're saying is that that wasn't an option. Then they didn't have the air assist volume controls on it. Before.
correct. Now that's not to say that you might not put that. You might put that on. You'd have to run the air full blast with it, because it's such a larger aperture, to make up for it, so that you still don't get. You can get smoke in your lens by the Venturi effect. Also, it can actually suck smoke in if that aperture is big enough that the airflow is not great enough to overcome it. To maintain positive pressure, it'll actually suck smoke in. So I don't use them anymore. But a lot of people use those on acrylic because there's not really smoke with acrylic. It just produces that powder that you see. And it's fine, and it is a particulate, and it can be airborne, and it can get on the lens, but it's not like smoke. Smoke rises and it goes straight to that lens as much as it can. So a lot of people use that one with the bigger opening, bigger orifice in it for acrylics, and they say that it makes a better outcome. So you could try it. Here's another reason that's a test
You're
piece.
pushing less air down through there then, right?
Right. You're basically just evacuate. You're just not hitting it with a jet. So basically the same effect. So.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious. I didn't know for sure. Well, I guess probably the hole in the back. I did kind of see a little bit of, a little bit of smoke when it was cutting, and I'm assuming that just goes back to that vent that's in the back of the deal, just kind of sucks down into there.
It does.
Out through your exhaust system.
You do need to get intimately familiar with your optics and inspect them and clean them very regularly. It doesn't take much for that, especially that focus lens. If it gets one speck on it, that speck will overheat, and if any more smoke gets there, it'll make it adhere to it, and before too long you have this big black burnt spot, and it overheats to the point that it'll crack your lens and cause it to fail. So you want to check your optics regularly and make sure that they're not dirty.
So is there a spot there too, somewhere that I can read where, because you're talking about taking the head apart, this whole blue head thing apart, right?
Yes. And let's look up lens and see if I've got something in there on it.
Well, Brian, I did get some other stuff in here in the toolbox. I didn't do anything with it, but I do have a bottle. It's called lens cleaner and lubricating oil, and it looks like maybe a small little a bag with, I don't know if this is some cleaning material or it looks like some thin type of cloth material or something in it.
Yeah, those are for the. Now here's the new users section, and it's highlighted in red up here. The new users start here, and if you'll look through here, you'll find. Of course, you've already got your machine, so the preparing for may not be, but there's unboxing, setup and first run. I believe I haven't populated this all the way. Yeah, preventative maintenance, cleaning the optics. What happened? What happened to it? Well, I think I lost you. Let me call back. Where did Tom go?